In the early years of the 21st century, terrorism was used by governments across the world as a pretext to scare their populations into submission. Life became a surveillance grid nightmare, with every individual's actions ruthlessly catalogued and recorded by the state. Secret arrests, checkpoints, and warrantless searches spread. The final incremental march of the police state, culminating in open martial law. This is the story of how the elite sold their people into slavery and scared the once proud and brave people of the West into submitting to being cannon fodder in wars for world domination.
Our enemies have made clear the danger they pose to our security.
We're just right outside the security perimeter at this national security event in New York City, just a few hundred yards away from Madison Square Garden, where at least 10,000 police are stationed, supposedly providing security for the Republican National Convention and all the delegates and media that are going to be here.
Sadly, we live in a world where, for the foreseeable future, you're going to have to provide security all the time.
Who do you work for? Well, you need to tell us. I mean, you know, this is a free country. Officer, can you tell me this guy's badge number? Secret police just covers his badge up. Secret police in America.
This is what's called ambush journalism, and I disrespect you for that as well. So thank you and goodbye.
In the ritual?
It's none of your damn business.
We're also going to be talking to the protesters and finding out if the protesters are discussing real issues or if it's more of this phony left-right paradigm.
On Monday, that Zogby poll was released that showed 50% of New York City residents believe the government had foreknowledge and made a conscious decision not to intervene. 50% of the people who live in New York believe that.
Both candidates are cousins. They're skull and bones. They're bringing in big government and tyranny. The evidence is clear. The military-industrial complex was intimately involved in 9/11.
Many of the nearly 2,000 protesters arrested over the past few days have been taken to an old bus depot on Manhattan's West Side.
We should call this facility what it is, and it's a concentration camp. It's the Pier 57 concentration camp.
Oh yeah, folks. We're in the middle of it now.
Stop exploiting the 9/11 tragedy!
Ladies and gentlemen, here is your Fuji-sponsored surveillance blimp.
Rollback of our civil liberties, just like them telling us we can't stand on the sidewalk here. Yeah, we can. We went to court and we can.
The Republicans are here and taking advantage of the 3,000 people that died right behind me for their own selfish politics, and it's very sad.
He is a man of perseverance. He is a man of inner strength. He is a leader who doesn't flinch, who doesn't waver, who does not back down.
On September 11th, America was attacked. Suddenly, on September 12th, according to John Ashcroft and George Bush, 270 million Americans became the suspects.
Hey, Michael, why don't you talk about NORAD standing down? Why don't you talk about NORAD standing down, Michael? Why not the really hardcore 9/11 issues? My friends, this is totally surreal. I'm in the middle of police, machine guns, high-tech sound weapons that are being used in Iraq. And the would-be dictator is on the radio. I'm in the middle of New York City. It's a hellhole of surveillance and police state. And the Bill of Rights being torched, being destroyed.
If you're here at 11:35, they will arrest you.
We traveled to New York to see the elite in action, but what we chronicled shook us to our very core. We were witnesses to the elite's ideology, to their mindset, their vision, their philosophy, and the martial law system that they are constructing, not just for the American people, but the population of the world. We're just right outside the security perimeter at this national security event in New York City, just a few hundred yards away from Madison Square Garden, where in just a few hours they'll be starting up the official coronation, Skull and Bones coronation part 2 for John Kerry's cousin, George W. Bush, right here in New York City. We'll chronicle the police state, the surveillance blimps, the sound wave cannons, and we'll discuss 9/11 with New Yorkers by traveling to Ground Zero and find out how many of them are questioning the official story that has holes in it that you can fly a 747 through. You were saying that a lot of people aren't on the street now. What percentage of New Yorkers have left town?
Maybe about 50.
50% have left? Yeah. Are New Yorkers happy about the RNC coming to town?
They don't.
They're not happy? Sir, what percentage of New Yorkers like Bush and like the convention being here?
I think about 10%.
What does the other 90% think?
They left city.
Everybody here. Everybody's gone? How many, like 10% of the city's left? Half the city? What would you say is left?
80%.
80% has left? We'd been in New York about an hour before we were threatened with arrest for having our video cameras in the subway.
Any one of them. May I ask you what you're doing, sir?
Okay, will you tell me again so I know what to do?
I'm not telling you what to do.
No, ma'am.
That's all I am telling you is that you got cops climbing out of... Okay, you have a convention and you have a terror alert in this city. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, tell me so I know what to do.
I don't know what you should do. Have a nice time. Okay. You want 34th Street. Okay, any train here will take you to 34th Street.
How do we pay for it? We were then threatened a second time with arrest for filming on the New York subway. And a woman who was separate from our group had her film camera taken, smashed, and the film destroyed. The footage you're about to see was shot clandestinely as the police took action against us.
I gotta talk to her because she took a picture.
I can't get arrested! I can't!
Let's not shed a tear over this now. Why are we playing games?
John, you're a witness to what just happened. What did we do?
We took a picture of a homeless person, felt sorry for her, and gave her some money. And then we were promptly almost arrested by Port Authority police in a subway.
The police had been arresting reporters across the city, and a judge had ordered them to stop, but that just seemed to encourage them.
Take him out. How about we go to whoever gave those to you and get them revoked? I just asked you to do me a favor and not tape over here.
It's my fault, sir. I'm his boss.
No. Listen, first of all, I'm talking. I don't need you to interrupt me while I'm talking. All right?
Okay.
And I just got finished telling him that I don't want him taping over here nicely to go over to the island. Were you here when I said that?
No, I was.
So why are you interrupting me now?
I said it's my fault.
How is it your fault if you're not here? All right?
How about we just leave?
That would be a great idea. Okay. Why don't you leave?
Okay. Did you get that? Oh, yeah. I've almost been arrested 3 times every day, anywhere in the city videotaping anything. It is an absolute nightmare. Hey, guys, get your cameras on. Yeah, what's going on? Okay, let me have my, well, number one.
Hey, we're allowed to be here.
Folks, this is martial law. Sir, how many police were in New York?
40,000.
That's a huge army.
It is.
I think we need more police. There's not enough police. Maybe we need 100 million police. How about 50 cops for every New Yorker? How's that sound?
Oh, no, it's a little bit too outrageous.
A few months ago, they had a new fake terror alert. Later, they had to admit it was fake, claiming that a couple of Muslim guys were down here trying to take photos and video of all of this because they wanted to attack it. And they said it was a brand new threat. But it turned out that it was over 4 years old. And then when we got here to New York for the convention, they busted 2 guys who supposedly were going to go after the subway. And then in that case, too, it turned out that that was fake, that wasn't real. But all of these are used to scare the population into submission and as a pretext to up the police state and the despotism. Straight out of The Running Man, right here in New York, we have police state surveillance blimps that are sponsored by Fujifilm. This is only the beginning. In the future, every major city will have a high-altitude blimp tethered to a cable with ground-penetrating radar that looks right through your walls and gives the government a black and white image of the inside of your home. This entire war on terror is truly a pretext to launch a military-industrial complex takeover of the entire society. Everything is now going to shift into prisons and surveillance and security. We're going out of the free market economy into the fascist economy. The elite has used socialism to consolidate the people's wealth. Now that it's under their control, they're going to phase out all of the programs for the population, and it's all going to corporate welfare. This is the new America. Sound weapons, police in black ski masks with automatic machine guns, and yes, helicopters swarming around surveillance blimps right here in New York City. And only in the new corporate fascist America would we have a blimp for police state purposes that is sponsored by a major company. And we found out that Fuji gave free bikes to all the police, and guess why? They sold the U.S. government, a bunch of different city governments, or trying to sell other city governments, these high-tech imaging systems, these face scanning systems to recognize who we are. So our face becomes a national ID card, and Fuji is on the cutting edge of that. In the past, football teams had sponsors, or baseball teams. Then it was named stadiums after phone companies, Southwestern Bell, Nextel. Now we have the Fuji-sponsored NYPD blimp. Follow the blimp. The blimp just flew over. Yeah, follow that blimp. Don't lose it. They're using that blimp for surveillance. We always know where the protests are at. There it is, sir. Follow that blimp.
No, Luis, but what is you know I can say about it?
What do you guys think of the new security blimp?
That's nice. I want to know how you get qualified to drive the blimp.
It says Fuji and NYPD.
Yes, it does. I want to go to blimp school because I want to fly the blimp.
So is Fuji now with the police department, or are you guys renting it?
I think we're renting it. You know.
Renting the blimp?
Yeah, believe it or not, right?
I heard a story that the police, in some of their helmets have cameras.
That I never heard.
I saw it on Fox.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
What about the big sound wave guns? Where are those?
I haven't. That I know nothing about.
Did you hear about those?
No, I didn't.
Did you hear about how they got the sound?
I can't comment on anything like that.
Well, it was in the newspaper.
I can't comment. I'm not allowed to comment on anything like that.
On the, what do they call the frequencies?
I don't know what they're called.
But you can't comment on them?
No.
You can neither confirm nor deny?
So it's going to be between 14th and 23rd Street, between 5th and 8th Avenue.
It's going to be on 3 streets. We're trying to find out how many of these protesters actually know what they're talking about and know what real issues are. So we're going to now go down the road and get in front of the demonstration that's massing right now. Then it's going to march down towards Madison Square Garden. We'll be there covering it when they come marching in. Sir, what do you think about the whole official 9/11 story?
Our government appears to be to have had a lot of cooperation with the forces that caused it to happen.
But I'm here to tell the world that Bush is wrong. He's a liar, he's evil, he's consolidated power in a way that is, it's bad.
Now, as most of you know, we're not left-wing or right-wing. We're into freedom, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. And whether it was Bill Clinton or George Bush, those freedoms are being destroyed. Under Bush, it's all accelerated.
I think if they were going to have a convention, they could have picked somewhere better than New York.
And it seems like Bush is trying to bind himself to the 9/11 tragedy. Do you have any comments on that?
I was there, and anybody that's going to try and put themselves above the people that actually help pull those people out is not worth my comment, man. I was there.
How's the convention going?
Convention's going good, no problems. Everything's good.
I heard some anarchists, though, were burning a dragon or a paper dragon.
Not over here. Everything's quiet, you know? Everything's so far so good.
What's the blimp doing?
Just keeping an eye on things, I guess.
I love being a puppet for the New World Order. They will be my slaves. I am the mini-me of Lord Bush. Oh, it feels so good. I'm enslaving them and destroying the Bill of Rights. Oh, it's so powerful. I will soon rule everything. Oh, yes.
We've been talking to a lot of the protesters, and most of them say Bush bad, Kerry good. The problem is Bush and Kerry are cousins. Kerry's for the war. And one of the few signs that we've seen that is exposing that both of them work for the same people and are part of a false choice is this communist revolution sign. But you know, I go back to 1958 when Eisenhower called Fidel Castro the Abraham Lincoln of Latin America. And so the problem is that it was actually the big central banks at the turn of the last century that created communism as a way to try to con the serfs back into serfdom. So again, another false choice is what we have here. Bush-Kerry equals more war. I agree. They're corporate fascists. It's all true. But then the corporate fascists have funded this as their counter-revolution control valve. This is the true complexity that we're facing. And until we figure that out, we're going to lose all our freedoms, and they're going to keep winning. How you doing, ma'am? Hey, I like the top part of your sign. I agree they're all controlled. Are you a communist?
Go away.
But it says communist revolution.
I really don't want to
stop bothering this lady. What are you worried about?
What am I? I'm not.
What did you say? I didn't hear you. How can you say that?
How can I say what?
Very nasty what you just said. Did you hear what he just said? Did you hear what this guy just said? He said something terribly nasty.
That stuff doesn't work.
You know, I don't know.
This isn't the 60s. Look, he's trying to agitate.
This is not going to happen.
This doesn't work, dude.
This is not the 60s. Don't happen anymore. We're living in the.
What I'm saying is, I'm saying.
I don't know what you said, but I heard
communism.
on the side.
Communism.
You said something nasty.
You work for the U.S. government, don't you?
This guy said over here. This guy's nasty. Boy, he is nasty. You are nasty.
I'm nasty. I said that the
you said some.
Work for the big banks.
Oh, the big banks. This man is from the big banks. He's from Chase Manhattan.
See this? He isn't interested in information. He's actually interested in putting out disinfo.
Chase Manhattan and Citibank. And Citibank and Chase Manhattan are part of capitalism.
You see, ladies and gentlemen, this is the communist for you. All disinfo, all propaganda.
It's all part of capitalism. It's all part of capitalism, isn't it? You're a capitalist. You're a capitalist. You're a capitalist.
The U.S. government admits they put Mao in.
Capitalist.
U.S. government admits they put Mao in.
Capitalist. You're a capitalist, are you? How much money do you have on you if you're a capitalist? Free markets? What does that mean?
You're capitalist masters.
What does a free market mean? What's a free market? How long have you been a person? How long have you been a jerk? Right. How long have you been a jerk? How long have you been a jerk? How long have you been a jerk? How long have you been a jerk?
Do what, mate?
Grow up.
Who should?
You should, asshole. Grow up.
No, I'm trying to find out. I agree with the top.
I'm trying to find anything. I'm trying to be a disruptive jerk. Why don't you grow up and get out of here, please?
Bush-Kerry equals more war. I agree with that.
Thank you. Good.
But what I'm saying is that the communists were actually at the beginning funded by the same people. It's all consolidation. That's all I'm saying.
Good. Thank you.
So you guys don't care about facts. It's all just disinfo.
Good. Thank you. Yeah. Sounds good to me. Thanks.
So you don't care that Stalin killed 50 million people?
So, yeah. So go ahead. So what else?
So you don't care?
So who are you? Kill? How many people did you kill?
No one.
But your ideas killed millions and millions and millions. Capitalism. You're a capitalist. You're a pro-capitalist.
That's for blood, right?
She wishes we were dead, right there.
This is the one?
She's the one walking around saying she wishes we were dead.
Replay it for yourself. She clearly says that too bad Stalin didn't kill us. So we see these communists down here who say Bush, Kerry, both equal war. And we go, yeah, we agree with you. But why are you for communism? Because communism actually, as Professor Carol Quigley at Georgetown, Bill Clinton's mentor, said, was a creation of the big banks to centralize governments and con the people into a movement for the population that was really for the establishment. And they began to threaten to want to kill us. Some of it we got on tape, some of it we didn't. Hey guys, how's it going? Tell us what you think about this.
We're members of the Revolutionary Communist Youth Brigade.
Tell us what you believe in.
That's it, man. If you want to talk to us, you got to talk to us.
You got to talk to Stalin, in other words. If you want to connect an interview, we can hook you up with our spokesperson.
You're not allowed to talk yourself?
If you want an interview, you should talk to the spokesperson. Well, have fun.
So your leaders don't let you talk yourselves?
They've never been to the Soviet Union, Poland, or anywhere in the Eastern Bloc. Look at them. They're like 18 and 20. Come on.
And you got these old... Who's that?
Why don't you talk to some mainstream Americans?
You're talking to everybody.
Okay. Okay, we know where you're coming from. You're looking to to make people in Lima.
No, sir. We're not mainstream media. We're actually trying to just make a documentary about all the different views that are at the convention. And everybody's been real nice to us, but communists, they always flip out when we try to talk to them. So now it is becoming an issue with them because they're so ridiculous.
Documentary on all views. You're very biased. Probably work for Fox.
Yeah, I probably work for Fox. That's right.
Okay, get lost.
You only knew how ridiculous that was. I've exposed George Bush for carrying out 9/11. I've exposed Bill Clinton. They all work for the globalists. And the globalists funded you little people. You guys need to wake up. Sir, a lot of New Yorkers have said, and the polls show 80% don't want Bush to have the convention here, but they're doing it. And some people say that he's being opportunistic, trying to associate himself with 9/11.
I disagree entirely. I think this is the perfect venue for Bush and the RNC to hold this event. I mean, New York City is a world capital place, big focus in New York from the rest of America, and I think it's a perfect venue irrespective of your party leanings.
Have you seen any of the protesters while you've been in town, and what do you think of them if you have?
Well, we've seen a few of them. Mostly, of course, they're kept away from the delegates. But to me, they're not New Yorkers. There's people that have come in and are trying to make New Yorkers look bad. They're a bunch of young kids. I'm wondering how many of those that are out there protesting, one, know what they're voting about, what they're protesting about, and two, are they going to even vote when it comes to the line? A lot of them are good people and have some legitimate issues, and I've seen people who aren't doing anything, whole streets just scooped up and arrested, and then they brought them out to the dock out there in an old condemned building with asbestos, it's admitted, and have 2,000 of them in there, no air conditioning, and cages inside a kind of a Guantanamo camp. Well, you know, I don't know of any of those issues and facts. If you're going to protest and you know there's a lot of security, this is just not the way to do it. Protest in another venue other than this. You know, I firmly believe in the right to protest, but this is just not a good place to do it. We've had too much problems in this city to bring more problems to this city.
September 11th for a reason as a setting point.
This nation was scared to death when those towers went down.
The term for it is called waving the bloody shirt.
I thought it was manipulative.
Get people, appealing to people's emotions rather than their reason.
I think they took advantage of a bad situation.
So why are you out here?
I'm from California and helping your documentary. We're here to protest the protesters. We're here to tell them they're just a bunch of leftist ingrates who are taking advantage of living in America. America is free because people have bled for this country. And we want a strong America, much like we want a strong police department, or we're going to have thugs ruling the streets. We want a strong police, which keeps it safe. We want a strong military, which keeps a good country. Yeah, the same Bible that the president is going to put his hand on that says no same-sex marriage. What are you doing hanging around a bunch of right-wing Christians? What are you guys doing hanging around us? This isn't Berkeley, pal. This isn't Berkeley, buddy.
You can't spell Berkeley.
How can they leave the borders wide open but then take our liberties?
I'm all for closing the borders. Are you kidding? I'm from California. Our hospitals are costing us $80 for an aspirin because illegal aliens are going into our hospitals. I don't understand what the word is.
Well, why hasn't Bush done something?
Well, I would like to see him do a lot more with stopping those people from coming over our borders. I don't know what the word illegal and illegal alien means if we don't stop them. America is a great country. We annihilate our enemies. Would you please get that dog out of here? There are homosexuals here in New York. You're liable to think that's a gerbil on steroids. Let's be more sensitive. Where's PETA when you really need him?
If those people are going to be in heaven back there, if those people are the ones who have armaments on their poster and everything, if they're going to be in heaven, I'm ready to go to hell.
This New York is a good example, folks, of what you're going to get in your city, this complete control grid, this locked down city where everything is commercialized, whereas you did that bit on your show where they know what you're going to eat before you're going to eat it. You hear about those guys, thought criminals. They're going to blow up something. They have no weapons. Well, and this is the thing, Alex, a lot of these people down here, they want democracy, and it's amazing how they've been conditioned to ask for their own enslavement. It's all they know. They don't understand this is a republic. Look at all of this. I mean, you'd think these people were very informed.
Explain the difference between a republic and democracy.
Well, I mean, basically, the democracy is mob rule, and what these people don't understand is that if 51%, whether they're corporate, whether they're Bushites, whether they're Mexicans, decide their fate, then so be it. That's what they're asking for.
We're in New York, ladies and gentlemen. Streets are jammed. My friend just called me, and he's right there with Michael Moore right now. I mean, all I want is 10 minutes. I want to say.
Just tell me, and I'll put it in.
Okay, cool.
All right, cool.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
Michael Moore is inside there. Now we're going to answer a question. Did Michael Moore expose the truth about 9/11, or did he whitewash it? You know, George Bush has said that anybody that has any connections to Al-Qaeda, should be arrested. Well, no one has greater connections to the Saudis and the House of bin Laden than the Bushes. They've been in business together for decades. George Bush actually started his first oil company way back in 1976 with a member of the bin Laden family and with their funds. The Bushes used them to go after the Soviets back in the 1980s. And bin Laden, according to a Senate report, was actually used to attack the Serbs back in the late 1990s. So when the Serbs fought back, they could say, oh, look, see, they're a bunch of terrorists. We've got to go in and take out the Serbs. My friends, the government had complete and total prior knowledge of the horrible events that happened here. And at the bare minimum, they allowed this tragedy to take place as a pretext to scare the population into total abject fear and then submission. In his film Fahrenheit 9/11, Michael Moore doesn't even talk about things that MSNBC and the Associated Press have reported on. That Osama bin Laden's code name in the CIA was Tim Osman. That he was a CIA asset trained in the 1970s and used against the Russians in the 1980s in Afghanistan. Then, of course, he helped against the Serbs in the late 1990s. Over and over again, Osama bin Laden has been used as a tool of the U.S. government and its interest. Anytime they need to create a crisis anywhere on the planet, bin Laden comes to their rescue as the fire starter they need to create the crisis so they can offer their solution. Or why didn't he talk about the huge 9/11 truth movement that sprung up right after 9/11, made up of hundreds of the victims' families of September 11th, alleging government involvement in the attacks? Why didn't the film talk about the official U.S. government plan to carry out terror attacks in America and blame it on foreign enemies? Operation Northwoods. It even called for hijacking jets by remote control and crashing them, bombing D.C., committing sniper attacks. No, Michael Moore didn't discuss this. Something ABC News and the Baltimore Sun were willing to do, Michael Moore wouldn't get near. Or did you know that it's admitted fact that public officials, federal, state, and local across the land, were called by the White House in the days before 9/11 and told not to fly to New York on the day of September 11th? Mayor Willie Brown of San Francisco was called by the White House and told, don't fly to New York on the morning of September 11th. He was called September 10th. Why didn't Moore talk about this? John Ashcroft, the Attorney General, just a few weeks before September 11th, stopped flying commercial, citing a hijacker risk. Most shocking of all, The Joint Chiefs of Staff had a scheduled meeting in New York City on September 11th. But the day before, because of a quote warning, they canceled their trip to New York City. They even told MSNBC this, but it's still somewhat of a public secret, and Michael Moore isn't talking about it. Author Salman Rushdie was warned by the FAA not to fly to New York on the morning of September 11th as well. It was reported by the Times of London. We have the San Francisco Chronicle, MSNBC, the Associated Press reporting all of this. But still, the average American has been kept in the dark because it's never made the nightly news, and it's certainly never been talked about by Michael Moore. And there was no mention of the fact that NORAD stood down for the first time in its 50-year history. To their credit, something that Michael Moore and the mainstream media did get right was that in the 3 days after September 11, 2001, over 160 members of Osama bin Laden's family were flown out of the country to Saudi Arabia. This at a time when all commercial and private air traffic was grounded by the Pentagon. But that wasn't the only airlift. Seymour Hersh first broke the story at the New Yorker magazine about the airlift of evil. It was then picked up by major publications, but, well, forgotten into the memory hole. At the end of the 3-week-long Afghan war in Afghanistan, 8,000 Taliban and al-Qaeda leaders were loaded on U.S. government C-130s and flown out to Pakistan to safety. It had been their job to stir up the phony crisis in Afghanistan and then give George W. the fake victory. You see, it was a staged war. And this is one of the other big smoking guns of 9/11 government involvement that we're all supposed to forget about. Oh, the government admits they flew him out to safety, but Fox News said it was an accident. Yes, 8,000 Taliban and al-Qaeda cream the leaders being flown out to safety. And top generals were told to release Taliban generals. They were told, let them go. And some of the generals got angry and went public. The FBI has gone public, as well as the CIA. They've even leaked the orders, like W199I, where George Bush ordered them to back off Osama bin Laden and his family. In fact, they even fired some agents that refused to follow their orders. There were red flags everywhere. Everyone knew that the attack was coming. That's why so many public officials didn't go to New York. But months before, there was the Bush administration frustrating the investigations, ordering the agents off the cases, ensuring that the attacks would go forward. Then there were the media reports by respected institutions, backed up by hospital officials at the American hospital in Dubai, Pakistan, of Osama bin Laden meeting with the CIA Middle East section chief for 10 days in July of 2001, months before September 11th. The question is, what was the CIA doing meeting with Osama bin Laden? Getting their story straight? Well, look, 2.5 years ago, I said that Bush was in business with the bin Ladens. Now, FBI agents have gone on C-SPAN and said it. Okay? I mean, it was in the Miami newspapers that they were flying the bin Ladens out. And I'd read it on my radio show, and people call it a conspiracy. It was in the Miami newspapers 2 days after 9/11. They got photos of them flying the bin Ladens out of the country when you and I were not allowed to fly. Bush and his family got their first money for Bush's Arbusto oil down in Texas from the bin Laden family. FBI agent Robert Wright at the National Press Club went up there and said, I've been threatened with arrest. If I tell you what I know, here's a letter from the Justice Department. All I can tell you is the Bushes vacation with the bin Ladens. How many of you know that the supposed hijackers, it turned out 7 of them are still alive? That's the BBC. So there we were in New York just wanting to talk to Michael Moore and ask him, why didn't you talk about these really important issues, these central issues? And in between his bodyguards coming over and shoving on us and telling us not to videotape him through the window, we began to realize that Michael Moore really does George Bush a favor. In his film, he acts like Bush is just some idiot who accidentally allowed 9/11 to happen because he was on too many vacations, out fishing too much. Oh no, that wasn't the reality. The reality is Bush and his corporate interest stood to gain from 9/11. And Michael Moore is covering up those facts.
And you don't want to let him eat, and once he eats, you can take a picture. Do you like your phone ringing when you're eating dinner?
I'm not calling it. reality, Mr. Moore had just completed his photo op for just a few minutes, marching at the head of the parade with other genuine establishment libs like Jesse Jackson. Then he ducked into the taco bar, had the general public thrown out, and began, well, gobbling. And I wonder what he was thinking while he was eating. Man, are they going to catch on to me? As the hours went by, are they going to find out that I'm really a fake and a corporate shill that flies around in a corporate jet? All those years I chased the corporate bigwigs around and was thrown out of office buildings and stood outside restaurants, and now I've become what I always said I hated. Or maybe I was always what I claimed I hated. Yes, Mr. Moore, we have nothing against you, but you made a film where you claim that you exposed George Bush. You gave him aid and comfort. You covered up the reality of premeditated involvement in 9/11 and played into that popular little folky image of Bush the idiot elf. Bush is a puppet for a hardcore global crime syndicate setting up a world government and turning America into a high-tech police state. But I guess though it won't matter to people like you. You'll have a fake war to fight, while all the time you're truly covering up the real political paradigm.
Big paper and all the Norwegian business there.
Did he already sneak out?
He's not.
Out that way?
He's gone.
How many bodyguards does Michael Moore have?
I can tell you.
Pero aquel digo que definitivamente tienen ver allí.
Hey, Michael, why don't you talk about NORAD standing down? Why don't you talk about NORAD standing down, Michael? Why not the really hardcore 9/11 issues? Michael Moore and the controlled opposition like him may be afraid to even scratch the surface of 9/11, but we're not. We're going to go to the rock bottom of this horrible event and expose who truly perpetrated it, because the future of America and free humanity hangs in the balance.
My name's Greg Palast. I report for BBC Television. I was a writer for the Guardian newspapers, the main paper of Europe. The way they're covering protests here, let's see, there was a picture in the New York Times of a scantily clad woman who was listed as a young communist poet. And let's see, there was a AIDS protester, who looks scary and spooky and is about to infect the rest of America shown. But you don't have what we're literally hundreds of thousands of average people just saying, we're fed up and we dissent and we don't like what's going on. Why don't you listen to us? That's what people are saying. Listen to us. We have a very interesting summer camp here in New York, 2,000 people locked up in a condemned building out on the pier. While the police say they've arrested 300, there are 2,000 being detained. What we see in Baghdad becomes in New York this week, Baghdad light. So instead of heavy tortured shackles, you have plastic handcuffs, but it still has the same purpose: keep the population in line. This is not the United States of America that we pledged allegiance to as little kids. We were very proud of the First Amendment, and you could dissent in the USA, and now suddenly dissent is becoming, they're labeling dissent as unpatriotic.
We're in New York City, right here on the Hudson River. And this condemned former bus station where they stored the buses is being used to hold over 2,000 protesters. And they admit that they randomly set up fences and scoop up whole crowds of people and then take them here. And for over 3 days, they've not let people talk to lawyers, call out, talk to their families. Some have been released. Some have gone to the hospital with rashes over their entire bodies. This building is condemned. The city admits it. The bus union wouldn't allow them to use it years ago, so they turned it into an emergency police facility. It's full of asbestos, chemicals, oils from decades and decades and decades in this 70-year-old building, and the average stay for someone scooped up in there is over 24 hours. The city even admits that.
Many of the nearly 2,000 protesters arrested over the past few days have been taken to an old bus depot on Manhattan's West Side. But now the use of Pier 57 as a temporary holding facility is stirring up some controversy of its own. Protests are being held there to spotlight conditions. Some of those being detained say they're getting sick. There are reports of cramped conditions, rashes, chemical burns, and difficulty breathing.
We should call this facility what it is, and it's a concentration camp. It's the Pier 57 concentration camp.
The mayor has the nerve, and the police commissioner has the nerve to allow this to happen, to actually stick people in an oil-filled garage with asbestos. The orange nets are about 4 feet high. They're used in construction to wrap construction sites so people can't get in or out. And the police just bring them around you and you can't escape. I've been promoting that idea that we're heading for a fascist dictatorship here. And obviously people are beginning to go, I'm beginning to think you were right. And I think tomorrow we got to get everybody out there at Ground Zero between 1 and 6 p.m. to try to get the truth brought out, to urge Elliot Spitzer to reopen this case.
Now you're going to learn the truth about 9/11 that others dare not tell you. We're here at Ground Zero and a big protest is gathering and preparing to march across town. And behind us you can see the militarized police are massing for a response if there's any type of problems that develop. This is a hallmark of a society in decline where you have peaceful protesters showing up at Ground Zero calling for peace, and you have police officers not with just non-lethal weapons but with fully automatic rifles. You see the founding fathers, they stood up, they were 4% at the beginning, and they said no to the redcoats and no to the establishment. And Mark Twain said in the beginning, a patriot is a scarce man. He's hated and feared. But in time when his cause succeeds, the timid join him, because then it costs nothing to be a patriot. And we're looking for patriots that know what the Bill of Rights and Constitution says, and that can see all of this and know that it's a fraud. Get that guy.
He's trying to take pictures of me. He's got you already rolling.
Hey, get him. Gonna make you a star. Better hold it up there all day. You with, buddy?
Have a nice day.
Huh?
Have a nice day.
No, seriously.
I have a job to do. You're going to interfere with my job, then we're going to be in trouble.
Hey,
okay?
really, sir, you shouldn't touch me. You need to identify yourself. You know in the state of New York that's assault, what you just did. And I'm asking you a question, sir. Why are you harassed? Who do you work for? Do you work for City of New York just to document people? Huh?
Excuse me.
Well, you need to tell us. I mean, this is a free country.
Alex?
Excuse me. Excuse me.
I mean, this is disgusting. Get some more of this guy. Well, there's your badge. Can we have your badge number, please?
Nope. See my boss over there.
Who's your boss?
Any one of those people. The bar's on.
Do you think God is a conscious man?
Sir, can you tell me this guy's badge number? Secret police just covers his badge up. Secret police in America. Out photographing people. That's the shot. That's the shot right there. Get it. There he is. Get it. Infowars.com. See yourselves. You're going to look good. Everywhere we traveled in New York, secret police videotaped and took photographs of us. But it wasn't just our crew. It was the mainstream media and the general public at large that were being photographed. But the worst area of all was Ground Zero, where the police took photographs of protesters and attempted to intimidate them as well. The police photographing the citizens is bad enough, but across the country we've caught the military photographing the public, as well as working with the police at football and baseball games, searching people's goods. Why in Alabama, the Alabama Defense Force comes out, forms cordons around whole cities during different festivals, and searches every man, woman, and child, training them how to live in a high-tech police state. And now our police themselves are beginning to turn into the military. And guess what the military does? They fight an enemy. They are set up to kill people and break things.
Susan back.
Sir, I just wanted to say that.
Well, we're going to leave it at that. Thanks very much. We'll be back outside Madison Square Garden in a few minutes.
And Susan, of course, the floor is empty, but they're here, and lest we be accused of not hearing all voices, we cut you off a moment ago. This is Alex Jones from Austin, Texas, a radio talk show host.
Yes, sir, with Infowars.com. Both candidates are cousins. They're skull and bones. They're bringing in big government and tyranny. The evidence is clear. The military-industrial complex was intimately involved in 9/11. The commission is a complete fraud. We're losing our freedoms. Both parties are controlled. And if we don't wake up and stand stand up and speak out, this country's going to be destroyed. Giving up liberty only gives us tyranny. It does not give us security. And I hope that everybody out there wakes up to this and realizes that America is America because we have the Bill of Rights and Constitution. Everybody should investigate 9/11 and find out who's really behind it. It's Bush's and the New World Order's Reichstag. And his cousin Kerry isn't going to save you either. Thank you, PrisonPlanet.com.
Alex Jones.
There's been an almost total media blackout on the fact that most of the 9/11 victims' families are angry at the government and believe that they had prior knowledge or were involved. But they couldn't cover it up when families came to New York for the 9/11 Commission and got in Giuliani's face.
Let's ask some real questions. Is that unfair? And what about the bunker? You didn't ask him about the bunker, the Office of Emergency Management bunker, on fire? It burned.
We are getting ready for the next panel.
Remember this. Your government funded and trained Al-Qaeda. Repeat it again. Your government funded and trained Al-Qaeda. 3,000 people murdered does not mean leadership.
Thank
It means a vacuum
very
of
much
leadership.
for your
Let us
help,
ask
your leadership,
some real questions
and
already.
your
Here's another thing the media continually buries. Giuliani got rid of all the evidence, all the steel from the Twin Towers. He immediately shipped it off. Giuliani's a former U.S. prosecutor. He knows a thing about keeping the evidence in a crime scene. And Giuliani suddenly got rid of every piece of evidence. He melted down all the steel, and the media didn't report it. That's not interesting. The families had to go testify to Congress to say, FEMA, you got to stop Giuliani from doing this. They tried to get Congress to stop Giuliani, and Giuliani said, oh, I didn't know anybody wanted me to keep any of the evidence. Well, my simple message is this. Again, Americans, wake up. You know your media lies to you every day. Your government has on record for hundreds of years lying to you every day. That's all I ask. Wake up, pay a little more attention, and don't believe anything you read in the papers.
How many times have we caught them lying to us?
Yeah, how many? Well, they just closed the Office of Disinformation, didn't they?
Why isn't that Zogby poll headline news today?
Yeah, why isn't that Zogby poll headline news? It should be.
Because every media in the country got it. Zogby sent it out to everyone.
What are you going to do when 92% think like us? Well, why isn't the media talking about that? That's a big deal that a majority of New Yorkers believe what we believe in the new major Zogby poll. Why isn't that a major issue? And what is the establishment going to do when everybody thinks like we do?
And on Monday, that Zogby poll was released that showed 50% of New York City residents believe the government had foreknowledge and made a conscious decision not to intervene. 50% of the people who live in New York believe that. Well, it's time for a serious investigation.
Then CNN conducted its own poll on Anderson Cooper's program 360. After an hour-long show where he and others demonized members of the 9/11 skeptics movement, they conducted their own poll, and an amazing 90% of respondents out of over 7,000 believe that there was a U.S. government cover-up. All of the people involved in the cover-up of September 11th have gotten wealthy off of it or gotten even richer. And then now, September 11th is being used to kill our freedoms, to destroy what America is built on, what America is supposed to really be about.
Most of my friends have questions about what happened on 9/11, and we'd like to know answers, and we're very disappointed in President Bush's reaction to 9/11.
My name is Les, live here in New York City, and I'm part of a contingent that has vigils here at Ground Zero every Saturday. We've been doing it since January, actually. And I've seen a lot of interesting things, heard a lot of interesting things from people. A few just happened today. A woman came up saying that her family received a phone call from a family friend. She was told by this family friend on September 10th, the family friend was a Navy SEAL, told not to show up in Lower Manhattan tomorrow, which was, of course, the 11th. There's going to be a major event.
MSNBC investigated the hundreds of reports of individuals in the towers being told not to go to work that day or being told to get out early that morning. And they found out that, yes, it was not an urban legend. It was true. They found hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of witnesses. And then the Israeli instant messaging company, Odago, admitted publicly, told Haaretz, one of the biggest papers in Israel, that yes, they got a warning and instant messaged hundreds of their employees in the towers and told them to leave the building 4 hours before the planes slammed into it. This is on the record and cannot be ignored. Students pointed up at the towers and told their school teachers in the weeks before 9/11 that those buildings are about to come down. They're about to be destroyed. And then on top of this, we have the public officials being warned. Total evidence of prior knowledge. And while we were in New York, we talked to dozens of eyewitnesses who had been personally warned themselves, but were afraid to come public. Some have been told to keep their mouths shut.
I was a rescue worker. I will say that I spoke to a cop on 9/11 who said that it was going to come down. I don't know how he knew that. He did tell me before it happened, before the fact that it was coming down.
The widows from the police department and the fire department were standing at the new school and back for the 2 days, and they were screaming at the media, please pay attention. We got phone calls. We listened that their husbands or their children were saying there's explosives coming on like the 23rd, 26th floor before the buildings went down. And the media started laughing and said, we have no time to hear you.
Larry Silverstein originally owned Building 7, and a few months before 9/11, he bought the entire complex, all 7 of the buildings, and then he took out a record insurance policy on them. Building 7 and what happened to it is so important because the official story is 2 jets flew into the buildings, we all agree on that, and that their jet fuel caused the steel to melt and caused them to collapse. But then we look at Building 7, which was the furthest away of any of these buildings from Tower 1 and 2, and it wasn't even damaged, but later that afternoon caught on fire. Now they've rebuilt Building 7. Here's Tower 1 and 2. Obviously, you all know those were hit by jet aircraft. And then we have Building 7, the furthest away from all the other buildings. Building 7 was 47 stories tall. Building 7 was not hit by an aircraft. Building 7 did not catch fire from these buildings. But later in the afternoon, mysteriously, it caught on fire. And then after 4:30 p.m., the firefighters told everybody to get back. They were, quote, going to pull the building, the demolition term for demolishing one. They told Associated Press reporters, get back, we're going to pull it. And this building that wasn't hit by a plane, that had no damage to it, collapsed symmetrically. Building 7 was a block away where my hand is, but the red flashing square is where Bankers Trust still stands today. It had Tower 1 fall onto it, but just had light damage. The owner, Larry Silverstein, of the entire complex, got on TV and said that they had blown up Building 7. He said they pulled it, demolition. Well, Silverstein owned them all.
Oh, Silverstein owned all the buildings. Yeah. How many buildings are gone?
All of them.
How many is that?
That's right. That plane wasn't, that building wasn't hit by a plane.
9 buildings are gone.
Yeah.
Thousands of people lost their lives.
That building.
Hundreds more. No.
And there's an official U.S. government plan to carry out the attacks.
He imploded that building on himself.
He admitted it. He said it on television.
He brought that building down.
Yes. Larry Silverstein.
So you understand?
Larry Silverstein on America Rebuilding on PBS said that they blew up Building 7.
Blew up 7. Even though.
Hey, he saw it. Did you see it on PBS?
Yeah, he pulled it.
He said on PBS, he said, we pulled the building. PBS.
Oh, yeah, he pulled the building.
Pelted by debris when the North Tower collapsed. 7 burned until late afternoon, allowing occupants to evacuate to safety.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Yeah, he said we're going to pull. He said we're going to pull the building. Silverstein said we're going to pull the building.
And we got the firemen saying they pulled it. I mean, Silverstein goes on PBS and says it, and we're the weirdos when he says it on TV. Unbelievable. Let's see that one more time.
Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
It takes demolition experts weeks to prepare for the destruction of a building. How do they do it on 9/11 in just a few hours? In the tragic days after 9/11, many prominent engineers across the world went public and said there's no way that fire destroyed any of those buildings. It's never happened to a modern building. Buildings have burned for 6-7 days before, and it hasn't happened. The answer was hidden in plain view. Larry Silverstein went on PBS and said that they had pulled the building, demolition term for destroying it. In fact, the local public radio station was told that they were going to demolish Building 7. But since then, the public has been told to be quiet, not to ask questions. And the government hasn't even given us an official story of why Building 7 fell. They say they think fire caused it to fall. And in case you're wondering what pull it means, here's another example, where they again use the term pull it to mean controlled demolition of buildings. Months after 9/11, the remains of 4, 5, and 6 were destroyed. Here's a clip from the same PBS documentary, where the head of engineering for the city of New York describes pull it as a controlled demolition.
By mid-December, the Department of Design and Construction had leveled World Trade Center buildings 4 and 5.
Hello? Oh, we're getting ready to pull Building 6.
We have to be very careful how we demolish Building 6. We were worried about the Building 6 coming down and then damaging the slurry wall, so we wanted that particular building to fall within a certain area.
There's a certain excitement in the air of bringing the last structure down at the World Trade Center.
Seconds after 7 collapsed, this is what Dan Rather had to say about it.
Large building. In most other cities, it'd be one of the largest buildings in town, probably. Trade Center Building 7 has collapsed. Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself. Describe that. Now we go to videotape, the collapse of this building.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
Just in case you missed it, here it is again.
Deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down. Deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
This is a photo taken 1 second into Building 7's collapse. Notice the crimp. If we look at other controlled demolitions, we see that they first blow one of the central columns so the building falls in on itself. If you don't do this, the building falls outward and has a wider collapse radius and can damage surrounding structures. This was not the case with Building 7. Building 7 had a classic crimp or wedge. Its central column was blown out first, so it didn't structurally damage buildings just a few feet away from it.
Building 7, while I was listening to live feed from our local public radio station later in the afternoon, they talked about Building 7. Building 7 was fine. There was no airplane that hit it. And then they even began to ruminate on the air about demolishing the building. I said, well, I don't know. I mean, you can put out fires. You know, why would you talk about demolishing a building that, you know, it wasn't hit by anything? You know, the fires weren't bad or anything like that.
What was in Building 7? Well, the Department of Defense, the Central Intelligence Agency, FEMA, U.S. Secret Service, Securities and Exchange Commission, and the city's main command bunker, overseeing the entire operation. That's what was in Building 7, a structure that was over-engineered, that could stand thousands and thousands and thousands of degrees of temperature for days if need be. But it collapsed in just a few seconds. Here we are, smack dab, right in the middle of Silverstein Properties. In the next few minutes, we're going to talk about Mr. Silverstein and go over the history of the World Trade Center complex and some very serious questions that need to be answered. You know, it's interesting to note that Larry Silverstein bought this building many, many years ago. This was the only building he bought in the complex, but 2 months before 9/11, he bought the entire complex, all 7 buildings, and took out a record insurance policy on them for over $3 billion, which he's now been paid. In fact, he tried to get even more. He wanted $7 billion on an original $200 million investment that they made on the entire complex when he leased the whole structure. Mr. Silverstein did quite nicely in his investment. Also, Mr. Silverstein, quote, with a shadowy group of investors, according to the Chicago Tribune, just bought the Sears Tower, one of the next big targets the government's been saying. We hope and pray that nothing ever bad happens, and that's why we're here exposing who may have motives in not stopping further events. The command center for Rudolph Giuliani was in this building. Rudolph Giuliani had his command bunker in this structure, and so did the CIA. It wasn't just the city of New York. The CIA, the FBI were all based in this building. And Rudolph Giuliani told ABC News that he got a call that morning about 8 hours before this collapse, before a fire even started, and was told, get out of Building 7. And he left to a FEMA command base that had already been set up the night before, which he's now admitted in congressional testimony, right down the street by the harbor. A lot of interesting timing.
And since 9/11, Giuliani's gone into the terror fighting business, and he's made hundreds of millions of dollars with Giuliani and Associates. Interesting.
And then, of course, we have George Bush's youngest brother, Marvin Bush, running security on the complex. And, of course, his contract, by the way, ended on the morning of 9/11. So that's another interesting facet to all of this. None of it adds up. But guess who ran security on these buildings? Marvin Bush, brother of the president, son of the former president, or the former CIA director. Marvin Bush ran security for this whole complex. And guess when his 2-year contract ended? This is the Associated Press on September 11th.
And where did the media pick up on this story? From Barbara Bush's own memoir, Reflections. She wrote about it in the book.
Then you have the firefighters telling Associated Press reporters to get back, to get away from the building, that Building 7 was about to come down. And then it magically did come down. And then the University of New York and the U.S. Geological Survey, federal and state, both seismographs picked up explosions going off, the classical pattern of a controlled demolition. He said that they made the decision on the afternoon of 9/11 to go ahead and pull or demolish Building 7, and that they gave the order and watched the building go down.
Building 7 is further away from the towers and was not hit by planes. It's further away from the towers than buildings right across the street like the Millennium Hilton and others. So if your building's owned by Larry Silverstein, it collapses because he's got a big fat insurance policy. But if your building's closer and owned by somebody else, it doesn't get damaged at all.
Why is the story of Building 7 so important? Why have we spent so much time on it? Because the official story is that the 2 planes that hit Tower 1 and 2, the big 110-story buildings, caused them to collapse, even though a modern steel building had never collapsed from fire. But then we have Building 7 that was further away than any of the buildings in the complex, that later in the afternoon got a few small fires in it and collapsed. Now they have almost rebuilt Building 7 on the exact same spot. And look, buildings right next to it, even though it collapsed on fire, didn't even get that much damage. And then we have this huge building that was right beside Tower 1 and 2 that was hit by giant chunks of the building that did catch on fire, but nothing collapsed. The difference between that building and the new Building 7 is that Larry Silverstein doesn't own that building. Larry Silverstein doesn't own the Millennium Hilton that was closer than Building 7. But every building he owned either caught on fire or mysteriously collapsed.
There has been over 100 uncontrolled fires in skyscrapers in the last 50 years, and never has one collapsed or come close to collapsing from fire. Only earthquakes and demolitions have brought these modern structures down. Then we look at the fires in Building 7, and they would be called moderate by any firefighting manual, but still the building collapsed. Building 7 had sporadic fires in it for 6 hours. Other skyscrapers, as we mentioned, have burned for days or even weeks. Why don't they collapse? Because steel doesn't begin to weaken until after 2,000 degrees of temperature. Around 2,500 it becomes red hot, and at around 3,000 degrees starts to melt. Another example of this was the Windsor building in Madrid, Spain in mid-February of 2005. It burned for 2 days at temperatures much higher, with white-hot flames shooting out of it for hundreds of feet. As we watched the Windsor building burn, I was amazed to watch the media of the world say, well, the World Trade Center towers and Building 7 fell from fire, so it's going to fall. We're just waiting for the collapse. But the collapse never came. All the major support pillars held fast. Steel doesn't melt at that temperature. According to official reports, Building 7 wasn't even in the debris field of Tower 1 and 2. And that's why it's important to look at buildings like Bankers Trust. We already talked about it earlier, but let's focus in on it with some detail. It was right up against the South Tower. only about 45 feet away, and large chunks of the South Tower fell directly into Bankers Trust. But Bankers Trust is like all other modern steel buildings. It's like the big building in Madrid, Spain. Despite the fact that fires raged through many of its floors and that huge pieces of debris fell on top of it and up against it, it didn't collapse. The architect of the World Trade Center towers, Nomura Yamasaki, told the press many times before 9/11 that he specifically designed the towers to take massive passenger jetliner impacts. The construction and project manager for the World Trade Center complex, Frank DiMartini, told the press multiple times that they designed the towers not to just take one large jetliner impact, but at least two, and not collapse. And other world-renowned engineers and architects went public as well, but that didn't matter for the mainstream media. They simply ignored their protest. Senior firefighter Lou Caccioli, who survived the collapse of the World Trade Centers, reported that bombs were clearly going off inside the structure. He told People magazine this the day after 9/11. When we spoke to him, he said he couldn't talk about it. Professor Van Ramiro, Vice President for Research at New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology, told the Albuquerque Journal that the implosions of the towers were too mathematical to be a chance result of airplanes, and that only controlled demolitions could have brought the buildings down. Then Kevin Ryan, an executive engineer with Underwriters Laboratories, or UL, that certifies most big buildings in America, went public and said, "It's impossible. Jet fuel wouldn't have melted the columns in Tower 1 and 2. This is from the organization that underwrote the towers. Then Firefighter Engineering, the oldest engineering publication in United States history, went public and said, "There's no way jet fuel made that happen. And stop hauling away the debris. Stop covering up the crime scene." We've got 7 different tapes showing different groups of firefighters saying the towers looked like they were brought down by bombs, that they heard explosions. But in the interest of time, here is just one of those clips shot by 2 French brothers who were making a documentary about New York firefighters on the morning of 9/11.
We came down. It was much worse than it was when we went up. Right? We went up and they had everything set up and came down. It was desolate. It was like, holy
We came down to the lobby. It was like the first in the wars. There was nobody there. What did we do? We made it outside. We made it about a block.
We made it at least 2 blocks, and we started running. Floor by floor, it started popping out.
It was if they had detonated. They were planning to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
NBC's Pat Dawson is close to the scene of that attack. Pat? Pat,
Matt,
can you hear me?
if we are, yes, I can, Matt. Just moments ago, I spoke to the chief of safety for the New York City Fire Department, who was obviously one of the first people here on the scene after those 2 planes were crashed into the side, we assume, of the World Trade Center towers, which used to be behind me over there. Chief Albert Turry told me that he was here just literally 10 or 15 minutes after the events that took place this morning. That is the first crash. He had roughly 10 alarms, roughly 200 men in the building trying to effect rescues of some of those civilians who were in there, and that basically he received word of the possibility of a secondary device, that is another bomb going off. He tried to get his men out as quickly as he could, but he said that there was another explosion which took place, and then an hour after the first hit here, with the first crash that took place, he said, there was another explosion that took place in one of the towers here. So obviously, according to his theory, he thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building. The second device he speculates, was probably planted in the building. So that's what we have been told by Albert Turry, who is the chief of safety for the New York City Fire Department. He told me that just moments ago.
And a CBS News chopper in the air over the towers reported the same thing.
If Jim Smith is with us still in Chopper 2, Jim, are you there?
Just, we saw some kind of explosion, a lot of smoke come out of the top of the tower, and then it collapsed down onto the streets below, much like we saw the first tower just about a half hour ago.
Chopper 2 as he takes these pictures. Jim?
Yes, I am here, Michael.
Jim, tell us what's happening out there.
Oh my We just witnessed some kind of secondary follow-up explosion on the World Trade Center #2, the one
secondary.
We've all unfortunately seen the famous photos of victims jumping out of Tower 1 and 2, but that happened in the first 15 minutes while the jet fuel was still burning. Later, we have the photographs of the victims standing in the impact holes from the aircraft begging for help for 20 to 30 minutes. How could they survive heat that would melt through giant 4-foot steel girders? The answer is they couldn't, and the firefighters are on record as saying the fires were almost out. The fact is, the temperatures had dropped dramatically. The fires were almost extinguished. The people were in the open wounds in the sides of the buildings begging for help. Help that did come in the form of the valiant firefighters who had the buildings blown up around them. The tape you're about to hear is from the grave, as a valiant firefighter reports that the fires were almost out. And as firefighters went public and said that the fires had almost been extinguished, the federal government ordered them under national security to stop talking to the public and told the media that all the firefighter tapes had malfunctioned, but not before firefighters had rebelled and released segments of tape, a segment you're about to hear.
What do you got up there, Chief? I'm still in boys' stairway, 74th floor, no smoke or fire problem. The walls are breached, so be careful. Yeah, 10-4, I saw that on 68. Freddie, come on over. Freddie, come on over by us. Hey, Ronnie, 415. We got two isolated pockets of fire. We should be able to knock it down with 2 lines. Where you know that? 78th floor, numerous 1045 cold runs. What scared you in, Mario?
Seconds before the towers collapsed, blast points could be seen springing up down the sides of the buildings from the top down. Within days of 9/11, Bush and his minions began grandstanding at Ground Zero, telling us, "Give up your liberties and we'll protect you. Go along with our invasion of the world and everything will be okay." Then there were all the pre-9/11 warnings from the French, the British, the Egyptians, the Italians, the Russians, the Israelis, the Indians. The list goes on and on, but Condoleezza Rice and George Bush told us they'd never heard of such a plan of al-CIA to fly hijacked jets into the World Trade Center and Pentagon. It didn't matter if CNN had reported on it back in 1995. Even the Taliban, 2 months before 9/11, said, "Stop Osama, he's about to attack you." What they didn't know is he was working for Mr. Bush.
I want to add that, the president knew about a month in advance before we were attacked here in New York.
He got the memo.
Yeah, he didn't do anything about it. And we all know that. Now he's here in New York in the convention, and he's going to be applauded by, thousands and thousands of people. This is ridiculous.
Howard Dean recently seemed to muse aloud whether you had advanced knowledge of 9/11. Do you agree or disagree with the RNC that this kind of rhetoric borders on political hate speech?
Yeah. Look, there's time for politics. And, it's time for politics. And, it's an absurd insinuation.
In that case, sir, can I follow up on something unrelated?
Let's talk about motives. The Project for New American Century, founded back in 1996 by 25 neocons, Dick Cheney, Jeb Bush, Paul Wolfowitz, all of these people said on their own website, in publications, we need, quote, helpful Pearl Harbor events. I don't think Pearl Harbor was helpful, but we need a terrorist attack on the order of Pearl Harbor to get the American people behind a war. The globalists took a baseball bat, and we're a beehive. America's a beehive, the sleeping giant. And they took that baseball bat, and they went, ooh, terrorists got you, bam! Hey, bees, the terrorist over there, go get our oil for us. And we all came out of the hive. And now we've kind of settled back down, so they keep waving the bat going, well, I don't want to hurt our bees too bad, but we may have to whack them again to get them behind what we're doing. All right, terrorists going to get you. Terrorists going to get you. Give up your rights to us. How many of you know that NORAD stood down for over an hour and 25 minutes, but if your Cessna gets off course for 5 minutes, they're going to launch F-16s on you? Remember Payne Stewart, the golfer? 15 minutes after his jet got off track, they had F-16s all around him. But on 9/11, in the most controlled airspace in the world, they could do nothing about 4 jets. But it gets worse. Guess why NORAD stood down? The average people in the military are good folks. They were told it was a drill, because the Associated Press reported, and the CIA's own website admits, that on the morning of 9/11, the CIA was running a drill of flying hijacked jets into the World Trade Center and Pentagon. It was just a coincidence. At 8:30 in the morning, there was a drill of the exact same thing happening, and so NORAD stood down. Anybody know what problem, reaction, solution is? Create a crisis to scare the people into submission. They're begging for help, and then you take their rights. Does anybody know what Hitler did? Right after he got elected, he firebombed his own Reichstag building. And then he said the communists did it. And they had a mass wave of arrest and took people's rights and set up Reich Security, or Homeland Security.
The North American Aerospace Defense Command is charged with defending North America's airspace. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, Vice President Dick Cheney was in control of NORAD. This was the first time in U.S. history that a president or vice president was in direct control of the military agency. NORAD was founded in 1957, and generals always had the power to shoot down or intercept hijacked aircraft. But on June 1st, 2001, just 3 months before 9/11, Dick Cheney ordered Donald Rumsfeld to allow him to take control of NORAD itself and the shoot-down procedure, and remove that power from the generals so they could do nothing. Here is a copy of the memorandum from Rumsfeld to the Joint Chiefs, telling them they no longer have any authority. An Associated Press article in August of 2002 reported that the CIA just so happened to be running a drill on the morning of 9/11 of flying jets in the World Trade Center and Pentagon. Then senior FAA officials ordered air traffic controllers to shred the tapes from 9/11 in violation of federal law. AP learned of the drills because at a Homeland Security function after 9/11, they bragged about it. Oh, we had foresight. We were running drills that very morning. Then USA Today reported that drills held weeks before 9/11 included targets that were the Pentagon and World Trade Center.
Don't just look at me. Take the damn paper, read it, get informed. We were undefended on 9/11. They're still in power. They're sitting there eating filet mignon. People are losing their jobs every day. We've got a bullshit war in Iraq. Who took responsibility for 9/11?
Well, shouldn't we reward them for doing a bad job? I mean, that...
Yeah, we should reward them.
Bushes, we should thank him for the job he did.
The way you reward traitors is how we should reward.
But he says he's done a great job, and
what he says, I know what he did.
Dick Cheney
ran and hid in a hole in Nebraska. I get fired if I make a typo in a letter, okay? I get fired for that. Instead, we've still got Rumsfeld, we've got Condoleezza Rice, we've got Dick Cheney, we've got all the same criminals. They're criminals because they allowed this to happen. 4 planes in 2 hours. How can that be? Only 14 planes guarding the entire East Coast. I say bullshit. Complete bullshit. We know this is the greatest country on earth. We have the biggest military on the planet. How can it be 4 planes in 2 hours? Do the math.
One of the biggest holes in their argument is the fact that they never heard of a plan to fly hijacked jets into landmarks on the East Coast.
We're going to take a closer look tonight at another example of where, despite the conventional wisdom, there were people in the United States who actually were preparing to defend against the kind of attacks which occurred here on 9/11. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD for short, has been defending the skies over the U.S. and Canada for almost 50 years, 46 to be precise. USA Today reports that in the 2 years before the attacks on September the 11th, NORAD conducted exercises using hijacked airliners as weapons. And one target was the World Trade Center.
We knew he hated us. But there was Nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings on such a massive scale.
But that turns out not to be true. U.S. military planners did envision and practice those very scenarios. As reported by USA Today, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, conducted exercises with fighter jets, simulating hijacked planes flown into the World Trade Center in the 2 years before the attack.
And so then I saw Condoleezza Rice get up on TV and say, we had never thought, we had never heard. Why, that's a ridiculous conspiracy theory to say that.
Pentagon planners also envisioned the attack on the Pentagon 5 months before it happened.
The Pentagon had a drill in November of 2000 simulating a hijacked jet being flown to the Pentagon. So between all the drills before 9/11 and the drill in the morning of 9/11, air traffic controllers thought that it was a simulation.
Hijacked aircraft headed towards New York. Is this real world or exercise? No, this is not an exercise, not a test.
And now respected rescue workers who worked the World Trade Center site say that they found 3 of the 4 data recorders and were ordered to load them on FBI vehicles and keep their mouths shut. Why would the feds want to cover up what was on those recorders? Thousands of years ago, when a crime was committed in Rome, the judges would ask one question, qui bono, or who stands to gain, who profits? And when we look at 9/11, the answer is clear. Let's look at what the Bush family was doing in the days before 9/11 and on 9/11, and it's quite revealing. Marvin Bush was in New York City running security for the World Trade Center complex. Former President Bush was in D.C. at the Ritz-Carlton for a Carlyle Group function, sitting at the head table with the head of the bin Laden family. 2 days before 9/11, Governor of Florida, Jeb Bush, declared unprecedented martial law in Florida. He didn't make the announcement until September 11th. Then we have the CIA-controlled head of Pakistani intelligence, General Ahmad Ahmed, arriving in Washington, D.C. on September 13th, just days after he wired, the New York Times admits, $100,000 to the supposed lead hijacker, Mohammed Atta. For the week he was here, preceding 9/11, he met with CIA Director George Tenet, the heads of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, Porter Goss and Senator Graham. By the way, Porter Goss has now been made head of the CIA. On the morning of 9/11, he was actually having breakfast with Senator Bob Graham and Porter Goss. What is the money man behind Mohammed Atta doing meeting with all the intelligence heads? In the days after 9/11, the public was told that we were going to be able to catch whoever was behind September 11th because they had engaged in record put options against American and United Airlines. But when the money trail led back to CIA-controlled companies headed up by people like Buzzy Krongard, number 3 at the CIA, the story was dropped like a hot potato. But that doesn't stop Buzzy from still going public and defending people like Osama bin Laden. He's told the Times of London and many other publications that we should just leave Osama bin Laden alone. Let him go free, that we've got a problem if we want to capture him. Prominent people across the world have been exposing the 9/11 cover-up. Michael Meacher, the number 3 man in the Blair government, wrote a huge editorial for the London Guardian titled "The War on Terror is Bogus," and he pointed out that NORAD stood down on 9/11. He wrote about the Project for a New American Century, run by Jeb Bush and Dick Cheney, years before 9/11, saying that they needed a helpful terrorist attack to get the American people behind their war for empire. Meacher concluded his article by saying, if the U.S. government didn't engineer the attacks, they certainly knew about it. Andres von Bülow was German defense minister and German technology minister. I interviewed him on my syndicated radio program, and he said there's no way Al-Qaeda carried out these attacks. Only the military-industrial complex could pull it off.
But here's one of the biggest pieces of evidence. You all heard them say that a paper passport fell out of one of the towers and was picked up by a police officer on the street. This plane flies into the building, explodes with jet fuel out of the guy's jacket, goes through the fireball, through the side of the plane, out of the burning building, out of the fire shooting out, and comes down to the ground unscathed. But something happened. For 6 months, they reported they had this passport. Boy, we've got it. We've got the proof. And then the guy stood up and was alive in the Middle East, and they pulled it and said, oh, that was a mistake. He wasn't a hijacker, and the story just disappeared of the passport. Because believe me, this establishment could care less about you. The EPA found all the asbestos. The EPA, guys, said that there was asbestos and people were getting sick, and there was going to be $90 million for the police and firefighters for medical treatment. And Bush came in and had that blocked. Now that's mainstream news. And now of the 14 search and rescue dogs, 8 of them have died from cancer.
In summation, it's important to note that we only covered a tiny portion of the facts and evidence that clearly shows that 9/11 was an inside job. Number one, the official story of 9/11 has been completely disproven. At every point, we've caught them lying, manufacturing evidence, or covering up evidence. From high-level government inside sources and publicly available facts, we now have a very clear picture of how 9/11 was carried out. Number one, we know that the men who were on board the aircraft, who were supposedly the hijackers, had their houses, cars, credit cards paid for by the U.S. government. They were, in truth, agents taking part in drills and nothing more. Supposed computer malfunctions at American and United ensured that all 4 planes only had 20% occupancy on board, on a day when flights on the East Coast were an average of 80% full. Once the decoys, known as hijackers, were on board the planes, a gas was released, knocking out the occupants of the aircraft. Then a small criminal group in control of remote control systems patented for over 20 years took control of the aircraft and flew them into the World Trade Centers and Pentagon. The CIA-controlled drills that morning confused NORAD for over an hour until it was almost too late for them to shoot down the hijacked planes. I said almost too late. When they did find out, Dick Cheney wouldn't let the planes fly over 350 miles an hour, so 3 of the aircraft were able to hit their targets. The 4th wasn't able to because our sources in the Pentagon have told us generals didn't follow their orders and had Flight 93 shot down. If it would have hit its target, the Capitol, the government would have been completely decapitated and the president could have declared total martial law. By the grace of God, everything didn't go as planned. And so now the globalists have spent the last 3.5 years trying to cover up the sloppy job they did on 9/11. They're counting on the public not being able to face the horror of what really took place so they can carry out another, even more devastating attack and finish the job they started, enslaving America and using the country as an engine to take over the planet. The only thing that can stop them now is the American people having the courage to face the truth about 9/11 and to expose it. If we don't, they're going to continue to use problem, reaction, solution. And it's going to be sad to watch the American people after the next attack going to the very killers that carried it out, begging them to protect them.
And it's sad to see the deaths of these 2,800 plus people being used to sell a police state in America. You know, Bush says the terrorists attacked us, whoever the terrorists are, because they hate our freedom. Well, then why is the government, period, whether it's George Bush or John Kerry, trying to kill our freedoms? America isn't America if we don't have these God-given freedoms. That's why this country is loved. No, now we're being forged into a tool of global empire to be launched against sovereign, innocent nations that we know had nothing to do with 9/11.
The Republicans are here and taking advantage of the 3,000 people that died right behind me for their own selfish politics, and it's very sad. I cried here for the first time today. I come here all the time. I've never cried here before. For some reason, I cried for the future because the way they're exploiting these dead people.
Because in your guts, you know that the criminals are returning to the scene of the crime to gloat and to use the bloody sacrifice they committed.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So now Bush is here in the Big Apple using the deaths as an attempt to get reelected.
September 11th. September 11th, men armed with knives, armed with chemical, biological, or even nuclear weapons. The fanatics who terrorist killers, September 11th, terrorist of Al-Qaeda, terrorist Taliban, nuclear weapons, terrorist. 9/11 terror. My fellow Americans, we have already been attacked. Terror, terrorist, evil.
September 11th, in those days after the towers fell.
September 11th. September 11th, ground zero. And suddenly the streets were full of sirens and there was fire in the sky. Terrorism, September 11th. Osama bin Laden declared war in America. September 11th, terrorists, a walking, talking weapon of mass destruction.
Barbaric terrorists, terrorists for terrorism. September 11th, September 11th. The terrorists, war and danger. September 11th, September 11th, terrorism, global terrorism, the horror. Terrorism, terrorists, Terrorist, 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 the terrorists. Terrorist, terrorist, terrorism. September 11th, global terrorism, terrorism. Terrorism. September 11th, world terrorism, terrorism. Terrorism, 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 terrorist. September 11th. Threat of global terrorism, terrorism, terrorist, global terrorism, terrorism, terrorism. September 11, 2001, global terrorism. Terrorist, global terrorism, terrorism, terrorist, September 11th, terror.
Terrorism, the attack on our homeland, back from the attack on our economy, and back from the attack on our way of life. Terrorism, terrorists, hate. We must be fierce and relentless and terminate terrorism. Terrorists, you defeat them. It yearns to destroy not just the individual, but the entire international order. That's why America is safer with George W. Bush as president.
September 11th, terrorism. September 11th, terrorism, terrorists. September 11th,
terror, terrorist.
Terrorist, terror. September 11th, threat, tyranny, terrorist, tyranny, tyranny. People hate us. Terror.
Terrorism. September the 11th, terrorist, 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 terror. Weapons of mass destruction. September the 11th. September the 11th. Terrorists, terrorists. The evil terrorists. Terrorists. The terrorists know.
The terrorists know. The elite know we're restless, that we're catching on to their scam. That's why they're now using sound wave weapons that the military has used in Iraq on the streets of America.
There's your LRAD, ladies and gentlemen, used against the Iraqis, used against the Palestinians, and now used against us in America. We're getting reports that about this garden, they're already using them. Long before 9/11, they were getting the sound wave weapons, the microwave weapons ready, building all the emergency containment facilities. They knew all this was coming. How you doing, officer? Did you know I interviewed the CEO of this company a few years ago? Our boys are using these in Iraq, aren't they?
No comment. Ask all questions to DCPI, Commissioner Paul Brown.
I'm from Austin, Texas. Are those the guys in the white outfits? Right. Do you know what those are?
What?
Those are sound wave weapons they're using in Iraq. They can burst.
Oh, it's because of
and now they're out here to be used in police. What do you think of it?
I don't know anything about it. It might be necessary, but I doubt it. I think everyone knows it's a peaceful protest. So.
Yeah, I mean, well, the point is that these are things used in Iraq against enemies, and now it's being used right here in America.
Now that the government in general considers the American people enemies of the state, defense contractors have a whole new lucrative market, selling high-tech weapons normally sold to the military to the police.
We're on our way to a protest that's unauthorized, not permitted. They've been arresting people by the thousands, and we're going to cover it. Of all the hundreds of huge protests we've seen, a small group broke off with an unpermitted march and is moving down towards Madison Square Garden, or MSG as New Yorkers call it. Now notice as we walk here that the roads have all been pinned conveniently ahead of the march. So tourists, anybody that's in here, to be arrested, and we are now inside the pens. And look at them hurting us. Look at their cars hurting us. I wonder if it'll be like Monday night. I wonder if they'll run horses and mopeds into us.
11:35.
If you're here at 11:35, they will arrest you.
But I'm sorry.
They're hardly letting people out. They're opening up the pens a little inch to let people slowly trickle out. So they're and now we're getting in trouble for letting y'all know.
Well, that little story about how they were going to arrest people really worked. Look, everybody's leaving.
Police then went in with barricades and broke the protest up into 4 different blocks and randomly arrested innocent people. It was the same story over and over and over again, and police brutality was completely out of control. Reporters for Reuters, the Associated Press, student reporters, tourists, even an American Spectator reporter was arrested and taken to Pier 57. Look around you. A prison is being built. A high-tech, cashless society control grid. We're now going to explore the ruling elite in the world today and what their driving ideology and philosophies are. We'll also look at their minions, the people that slavishly serve them.
Well, here we are all the way from Austin, Texas, covering the Republican National Convention. What we're seeing here is Skull and Bones coronation number 2. Well, down here you can see the CNN staff, Bush Light. They love the president, put out all the propaganda. They also worship Kerry. So does Fox News when it comes to worshiping Bush. So here's the so-called mainstream media you can trust, which is nothing more than basically a CIA front to propagandize and manipulate the people. But it's all in a slick packaging with a great, impressive background, and that's what people respond to. You know what? I bet most of those so-called Texans down there from that Texas delegation aren't even first-generation Texans. They're just as phony as George W. Bush is. A guy who is from Kennebunkport, Maine, whose daddy speaks with a perfect Atlantic accent. People who were Tories back in the Revolutionary War. They came down carpetbagging to Texas when George was a little boy. And now so many Texans and phony Texans have been sucked in by this and just love the whole motif. But again, it's form over substance. It's the packaging. Yeah, I'm a slave. I'm happy about it. I'm proud of it. I've decided to just join the New World Order. I've decided to just go along with it and have a good time. The media has really been covering Skull and Bones lately, how Bush and Kerry are both members. Are you aware of that organization?
I am not.
Does it concern you that they both were in the same fraternity in college and just 2 years apart?
No, it does not.
Just one hell of a coincidence that 15 members each year out of 290 million people and the 2 presidential candidates are Skull and Bones.
I would say that's a coincidence. I would say that's a coincidence.
What do you think about Bush and Kerry being cousins and members of Skull and Bones?
Excuse me?
Did you know Bush and Kerry were cousins?
Kissing cousins or what?
They really are cousins.
They really are.
There's only 15 members of Skull and Bones each year out of 290 million Americans, and both of them are Skull and Bones. Certainly you're aware of that.
Oh, well, why wouldn't you be? Talk to Bill O'Reilly. He'd have that answer. I know he would.
Well, but I'm not talking to Bill O'Reilly. What do you think? Yeah. We need to talk about it. I mean, him and Kerry are cousins. They are members of Skull and Bones.
The question is, would he be a Skull and Bones guy today? I mean, you know, people do crazy things when they're young.
Well, his dad was a Skull and Bones, and his dad. It's in politicians' autobiographies. You know, it's in the encyclopedia. And it was called the Illuminati.
I remember reading about the Illuminati in the 60s, late 60s, when Hal Lindsey came out with a book, The Late Great Planet Earth, and everybody's going to get raptured and go to, you know, and so kids were walking around talking about that theory, and then the Illuminati book came out, or a number of them came out, and it was one world government, one world money system, one world religion.
That's all coming now.
Oh, it is.
Conspiracy theories never work. I mean, look at...
Well, every time I bring it up, somebody says, oh, you think it's a conspiracy? No, it's a real group. I want to know what you think.
We got into not a debate, but a gal who is a real confirmed Republican. She married a real liberal guy, and the next thing you know, we have her over for dinner, and I hate Bush. And I said, whoa, where'd all that come from? And she got right down to... you know, all the things of all the presidents being involved in this society, all Masons, and that was her whole base. And I hate Bush. And I said,
well, then how could she hate Bush? Because Kerry's a member.
Well, yeah, that's a good question.
A lot of people aren't going to know what Skull and... I don't really know what it is. I know he was a member of it. It's some secret society, and
it's so secret I can't talk about it.
Yeah. By the way, you better watch yourself. You know what I'm saying? Because if there's anything to it, you're a marked man.
You guys have a good night.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're in the right place to be safe.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go wild.
I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee, and look, I look forward.
Are you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code?
I wish there were something secret I could manifest.
322, secret number?
There are all kinds of secrets, Tim, but one thing is not a secret. I disagree with this president's direction.
Most people don't know the Order of Skull and Bones at Yale is simply one chapter in a larger global organization known by many as the Illuminati. Its symbol is a skull and crossbones and the number 322. Skull and Bones is the name used by the uninitiated or non-members. The true name of the organization is the Order of Death or the Order of the Death's Head. George Bush and John Kerry have both been initiated in the same way. They swore an oath to the tomb, to the order of death above all others, and to wage eternal war against all of humanity. In April of 2001, ABC News was able to get a few minutes of video of a small portion of the ritual that's conducted outside in a courtyard. What they witnessed was macabre, chants of death equals death and devil equals death, accompanied by mock human sacrifices. President Taft was a prominent member of Skull and Bones, and in 1900, he became the first president to visit Bohemian Grove in Northern California, a satellite of Skull and Bones. For 3 generations, the Bushes have been members of Skull and Bones, and for 3 generations, they've traveled to Northern California and the Bohemian Grove. There are many prominent foreigners, like German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt. Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon are pictured here in 1957 at the Bohemian Grove. Both men wrote about the organization in their public memoirs. Schwarzenegger is a reported visitor to the Bohemian Grove, as well as former President Jimmy Carter. While in New York, we ran into the Karl Rove of 4 administrations. David Gergen, top presidential advisor to Ford, Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, and Bill Clinton. We couldn't believe our luck. It just so happens that David Gergen is also a prominent member of the Bohemian Grove, the offshoot of Skull and Bones. This insider of insiders, a staple of the White House for 22 years, got very upset when we brought up Bohemian Grove to him. He didn't deny its existence. He didn't deny that he was a member. He didn't deny the rituals. He just became angry and didn't act very gentlemanly.
The real wild card here are the demonstrators. We just don't know where this is going to go. While they were peaceful today, there's a lot more anger among those demonstrators than is evident. You talk to them today, they're pretty angry people. So that's the big wild card.
Hey, Mr. Gergen, can we talk to you for a second?
Where are you from?
I'm Alex Jones. I have a TV show in Austin. I make documentaries. Just a few questions about the convention.
Yeah, well, is there a camera or are you?
Yeah, right there. Just about. Yeah, but I just want to get your permission first. Here.
Okay. It's local. I've got.
No, I understand. Just about a minute or two.
Okay, great.
We're talking to David Gergen, and he has advised several presidents, and of course has written quite a few books, and is a, I would call you a political pundit or researcher.
Commentariat, over the hill, whatever.
Okay. How long have you been in New York?
About 4 hours.
What do you think of this circus?
Well, I haven't seen all the protests yet, but I've never seen as much security for a convention as we have here. And it's, the city's almost closed down. I think it's remarkable. I think it's an unfortunate turn for politics that we have to have this many police around.
There's been a lot of news articles and reports saying that there's a heightened risk of terror attacks. Do you think that that's? Do you think there's a chance of that, or comments?
I think. Well, listen, they just arrested, I think, or broken up some plot allegedly to somebody wanted to blow up subways. Yeah, I think it's a very real danger, and you've got. Madison Square Garden is sitting right, basically on top of a train station, and Boston Convention was right on top of a train station. Yeah, I just have to remember that trains are very accessible, vulnerable, and that's what happened in Spain. They went after trains and they blew some trains up, and it wasn't very expensive. So I think there's that danger, but I think the police are on top of it. They're treating this as a special security event, which means there's not only the obvious police around, but believe me, there's a lot of private stuff going on here.
Okay, one last question. I read a Washington Times article many years ago where you had a comment about the organization, and then now it's been in the Wall Street Journal, it's been in a lot of different newspapers, and that's the Bohemian Grove. And back in, what was it, 1996, when you joined as a Clinton advisor, the Republicans were criticizing you, oh, what about Bohemian Grove? And then you countered them by saying, hey, I don't run around in the woods naked. What did that mean?
Here is the before-mentioned Washington Times article where he said, I didn't run around naked like they do.
I don't know what quote you're referring to. I'm not aware of any quote like that. Listen, I am a happy member of the Bohemian Grove. I like the folks who come there, and it's really inappropriate for me to talk about the group beyond that. Thank you.
Have you been there for the ceremony with the cremation of care?
Frankly, I don't think that's something I need to talk to you about.
Great owl of Bohemia, we thank thee for thy adjuration.
Have you been there for the ceremony with the cremation of care?
Frankly, I don't think that's something I need to talk to you about.
Really?
That's right.
Well, I'm Alex Jones, and I snuck in there in 2000. I'm the guy that blew it wide open and got the video, and it's been on national TV.
Well, I disrespect you for that.
You do?
I do.
But it's a lot of big public officials going in there. Don't we deserve to know?
I don't know anything about you, and I don't know anything about your film. But if you go in there with an understanding, you violated that understanding by releasing that film, and I don't respect you for that.
Really? But we have public officials.
I'm sorry. You took an understanding when you went in there that you would not do that film. And did you have an understanding when you went in there?
No.
Did you crash it?
Yes.
Yeah, and it has no trespassing signs there too, doesn't it?
No, they put them up after.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just walked in.
I'm sorry, sir. I've been there before. I know what the circumstances are, and I'm sorry you violated the understandings. That was not a gentlemanly thing to do.
But what about the ritual? Is the ritual gentlemanly?
Sir, everything I don't owe you this comment.
I know. I appreciate it.
This is what's called ambush journalism, and I disrespect you for that as well. So thank you
ever
and goodbye.
Been in the ritual?
It's none of your damn business.
Oh,
that's right. Listen. You go around and make understandings with people and violate them. You ambush people on the streets, and that's inappropriate form of journalism. If you wish to practice that, that's fine, but don't ask others to respect you for it. If you want to, you can do. You're a free American, like anything you want. If you want to be uncivil and rude and ungentlemanly, that's up to you. But don't expect the rest of us to say, "Oh well, you're
there, Mr. Gergen."
I'm sorry, nobody sets policy in there. We try to be gentlemen, and obviously, you don't belong there.
Weaving spiders coming out here. Yeah, that is a three-pointer. Woo! Boy, I hit the hot button. Mr. Gergen, have a wonderful life. Say hi to Moloch for me, Canaanite deity, and I'll see you at Eyes Wide Shut, baby. Bye-bye. Get his face, get his face, get his face. Get his face, get in there and get his face. David Gergen.
David Gergen says that we're angry?
The real wild card here are the demonstrators. We just don't know where this is going to go. While they were peaceful today, there's a lot more anger among those demonstrators than is evident. You talk to them today, they're pretty angry people. So that's the big wild card.
Thank you and goodbye.
Been in the ritual?
It's none of your damn business. It's none of your damn business.
Oh.
That's right. Listen.
Just look at him. That's a face keeping a lot of secrets. He's got some stories to tell. And remember that Washington Times article? It talked about all the other organizations that he resigned from. It mentions the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, all of them groups dedicated to setting up a world government and destroying American sovereignty. You're looking at video that I personally shot during the cremation of care ritual held at Bohemian Grove. My documentary film, Dark Secrets Inside Bohemian Grove, details how world leaders from across the planet meet every July and actually engage in mock human sacrifices to the Canaanite deity Moloch. They bring a bound body in an effigy of a child and sacrifice it to the idol. And incredibly, most of those in attendance are our supposed Christian conservative leaders. Here's a video still I shot while I was inside of the encampment. you see a human skull in effigy. And let's look at that deity they worship, Moloch, a Semitic deity mentioned in the Bible whose worship was marked by the human sacrifice of children. Since we blew their cover in 2000, the Grove's gone public to a certain extent. They released this photo of a 1915 ritual. Here you have the hooded figure over the mock sacrifice. And here's a simulated hanging from 1908. In this picture, you see a photo from 1909 with what looks like public officials in attendance. A black boy is tied down to some type of table, and around him we see people in strange garb. I'll leave it to you to figure out what they're doing. In 2004, the Grove released this photo from 1934 of members in hoods. The Canaanite deity Moloch was worshipped in Greece, Babylon, and then later in Europe. It is normally symbolized by a bull or an owl or some type of horned beast, and children are sacrificed to it. It is the precursor of all modern death cults. I was able to get out of the cult compound with this program cover from the Cremation of Care, and right on the front, where a child would be burned, they had photoshopped in the image of a skeleton burning in the flames. What purpose does this all serve, having world leaders congregate and engage in an ancient Canaanite ritual of mock child sacrifice? It's a way of binding them together, whether it's George Herbert Walker Bush or Henry Kissinger or Ronald Reagan or Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan, who's been a member since 1984. It's about bringing them together. Nowhere is the origin of the cult more in evidence than in former German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt's own autobiography, Men and Powers, a political retrospective. He talks about how they have their own German groves where they do these rituals, these, quote, druidic rituals. But he says his favorite place to do the rituals is at Bohemian Grove. This is a book that you can get at the library written by him. He talks about the Trilateral Commission, the CFR, the Bilderberg Group, and world government. And he says that much of the decisions are made at the Bohemian Grove. We were able to obtain the internal annals of the Bohemian Grove from 1987 to 1996, a publication only given to members. And in it, we see pictures of George W. Bush and his father, Newt Gingrich. We see all of these different famous individuals there at the Grove. Walter Cronkite, Jimmy Carter, Jack Kemp, Richard Milhouse Nixon. The list goes on and on. If you're still doubting reality, here is a November 1989 issue of Spy magazine. The Grove released photos of themselves dancing around dressed like women. And in the article, they admit that they do mock human sacrifices. The article went on to show artist renditions of the Moloch idol, as well as discussing how they bus in male prostitutes and how AIDS was a big problem. Then a New York Post article in July of 2004 reported how a top gay porn star serviced the moguls at the Bohemian Grove. This 1914 Bohemian Grove annal has a swastika on its cover, and inside it talks about how they're a German death cult founded by the Illuminati. But some of you are saying, wait a minute, the Nazis invented the swastika. That was their symbol. You're talking about 1914 and 1920. My friends, the swastika was used by the Buddhists. It was used by Native Americans. It is a sun symbol, and it was used by Druids in Europe thousands of years ago. In the 1920s and 30s in the U.S., it was a symbol of good luck, like a horseshoe. But for the Nazis and members of the Bohemian Grove, it was a symbol of power. And Adolf Hitler was obsessed with the occult. The roots of Nazi Germany grew out of groups like the Thule and Thule Society, organizations obsessed with black magic, which themselves sprung from older organizations like the Illuminati. All of these groups corresponded and called themselves Orders of the Death's Head. Adolf Hitler was a member of the Thule Society. Here you see one of their publication covers from 1919. He took their symbol as the signet of his party. It has been reported that after Madame Blavatsky died, Aleister Crowley became the head of the German Illuminati, also known as the OTO. Aleister Crowley was called the most evil man alive because of the bloodthirsty rituals he engaged in. It's important to note that both of his children died in questionable circumstances. So should we be surprised that the leader of the Third Reich, who killed millions of people, was an adherent of both of these sickening individuals? The Waffen-SS were the henchmen of the Nazi Party, and they wore an aluminum or silver death's head on their hats. Here you have a famous field marshal of World War I, and adorning his headdress is a death's head. In reality, all of Hitler's actions were nothing more than a manifestation of the deepest and darkest dreams of the Order of Death. And remember that the Order of Skull and Bones of Bohemian Grove are nothing more than offshoots of this global movement. The Nazis wore a skull and crossbones on their hats. Compare that to the skull and bones symbol. And beneath that, an early Nazi party medal, not just with a swastika, but the 32 or 322 of skull and bones. We see these symbols throughout Nazi culture, especially on their icons and standards. Hitler believed that they drew power from these symbols, and he publicly talked about it. Here is an official photo taken from the Presidential Library of George Herbert Walker Bush, showing him standing with his classmates. And there it is, the Order of Death symbol, the skull and crossbones with 322 beneath it. Would it surprise you to know that one of the chief members of Bohemian Grove, Thomas Watson, was also an adherent of Adolf Hitler's ideology, and that international business machines were integral in controlling the death camps? IBM was absolutely essential in assisting Hitler in numbering and exterminating the Jews and other undesirables. The famous tattoos on Jews' arms were international business machine numbers that were entered into the computers. The computers would then decide how long to keep someone alive and how hard they could be worked according to height and body weight as well as age. Here's a photo of Mr. Watson with Adolf Hitler in the late 1930s. It's not a coincidence that today IBM is the backbone of national ID card technology in the United States and across the world. Ford and General Motors were also involved in the Nazi war machine right through the war, and not one of these robber baron industrialists was ever prosecuted. Here is the international business machine that calculated the deaths of millions. The modern Olympic symbols have nothing to do with Greece. They were drawn and designed by Adolf Hitler, and we still use them today. The Order of the Death's Head symbols are all around us, but the general public is too blind to see it. Now we will explore how the American branch of the Illuminati aided and abetted Adolf Hitler, and how the Bushes were the first family when it came to treason.
I've been an investigative reporter and a journalist for 35 years. I've worked in every major media market in the United States, and I've written for more than 100 newspapers and magazines nationally and internationally. So last September 17th, I became the first journalist in U.S. history to go to the U.S. National Archives and the Library of Congress and pore over the thousands of pages of documents in both places to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt or any refutation of the facts that Prescott Bush, the grandfather of George W. Bush, and George Herbert Walker, his maternal great-grandfather for whom his daddy is named, were Nazi traitors to the country who should have been tried for treason. 2 weeks ago, in early August, a major world newspaper, The Guardian of London, finally got on the story internationally, and they flew a renowned reporter of theirs named Duncan Campbell over to Washington to take me back to the archives and Library of Congress so that they could verify that these explosive documents were real and I didn't have forged copies. Prescott Bush was the grandfather of George W. Bush and the father of George Herbert Walker Bush, and George Herbert Walker Bush is named for his father-in-law, George Herbert Walker. Prescott Bush graduated from Yale in 1917 and was in Skull and Bones with E. Roland Harriman, who was the younger brother of W. Averill Harriman. The Bush family really had nothing going. They were essentially social climbers and opportunistic people. At the time that Prescott Bush met Dorothy Walker, he was a tire salesman. And George Herbert Walker, as all fathers do when their daughter's going to marry someone, said in his heart, you know, it's not an appropriate thing socially that my daughter marry a tire salesman. So he brought Prescott Bush first into Brown Brothers Harriman and then Union Banking Corporation. In actuality, it was anything but a bank. It was essentially a Nazi money laundering operation that had a lot of tentacles into a lot of different other businesses. They owned a shipping line called Hamburg American Line, for example, which was the first Nazi front business seized, although the line was no longer operational in 1942. In the early 1930s, it transported Nazi spies into the U.S., and then their promotional ads offered cash rewards to any American citizens who would go back on Hamburg American lines and proselytize for Hitler. 8 months after the U.S. had entered the war, the New York Herald Tribune ran a front page article, Hitler's Angel has $3 million in U.S. bank. And it caused a major scandal and just rocked the world of politics. Brown Brothers Harriman, which George Herbert Walker and Prescott Bush were affiliated with and partners in, worked with IG Farben, which operated Auschwitz. Prescott Bush, he did a number of things that were not only anti-American, but were pro-Hitler, and he did all that he could to proselytize for Hitler and the rise of his Third Reich, because the largest client, Fritz Thiessen, of his patron, W. Averill Harriman, dictated what kind of behavior he would practice to enhance his own career. So he was put on the board of directors of Union Banking Corporation, and he was also a shareholder in Union Banking Corporation along with E. Roland Harriman. But what's interesting about what the documents show is that they clearly state that all of the shareholders were phantom shareholders for Fritz Thiessen and did his bidding directly. So the point I'm making is it's not as if they bought these shares of stock as a passive investment to hopefully profit from the war. They were directly doing the bidding of the individual who built the Nazi war machine. Some very shocking documents that I saw at the Library of Congress 2 weeks ago on August 10th, on August 9th, excuse me, had to do with the hearings of the McCormick-Dickstein Committee of November 1934, show that Prescott Bush and the DuPont family, the Remington family, and J.P. Morgan tried to overthrow the U.S. government, assassinate FDR, and put a Hitler-style fascist state in place. I have in my possession testimony from the McCormick-Dickstein Committee in November of 1934 by one of the fascist plotters that they were going to follow Hitler's model exactly and impose martial law on the United States, round up unemployed people that were worthless to the economy and troublemakers and Jews and put them into internment camps. And their plan was, if necessary, to exterminate the people that could not be part of the effort. The only reason the coup attempt in 1934 didn't succeed is that they hired the wrong general to lead it, General Smedley Butler, the great Marine hero, two-time Congressional Medal of Honor winner, who worked with the plotters just long enough to be able to identify who they were and then blew the whistle on them to Congress. Incredibly, after being warned by the FBI and the Justice Department and the Treasury Department to cease and desist in their Nazi dealings, they had continued them until 1951. There had been 28 additional seizures of Nazi assets and Nazi business fronts between late 1942 and 1951, and that they had moved Nazi assets into Switzerland, Brazil, Argentina, and Panama, and they had continued to do business with their primary Nazi patron, who was Fritz Thiessen, who backed Hitler beginning in 1921 and who was the wealthiest man in Germany, and a steel and coal baron who, with his partner Friedrich Flick, essentially built the Nazi war machine along with IG Farben. In 1951, when Fritz Thiessen died in Argentina, Union Banking Corporation was liquidated by the U.S. government, and Prescott Bush received $1.5 million for his holdings in his Nazi business, and that was the beginning of the Bush family fortune for all intents and purposes. George Bush doesn't take his philosophical foundation from the Bible or the teachings of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. George Bush takes his inspiration from what he learned in Skull and Bones and from the Thule Society that Hitler and Goebbels and Goring cut their teeth in, Bohemian Grove, these evil organizations that perpetrate the ugly things that these criminals are doing to this country for which they must be held accountable. Now you look at the Republican National Convention this week and you bring in Arnold Schwarzenegger to speak last night. Schwarzenegger is the son of a Nazi. He has praised Nazis. He has praised Hitler. He talked last night in terms like, we will not falter, we will not waver, we will win this war on terror.
He's a leader who doesn't flinch, who doesn't waver, and does not back down.
Well, that's exactly the speeches that Hitler made after the Reichstag fire. Terrorism and the homeland being under attack are precisely the issues that Hitler used to subvert everything within the German system of government. This is a criminal regime. They not only emulate Hitler, but its genesis comes from Hitler. And I defy anyone, a historian, journalist, author, anyone, to come forward and disprove my premise that you cannot differentiate Hitler's invasion of Poland in 1939 and the Reichstag fire and his attempt to dominate the world from George W. Bush's unprovoked invasion of Iraq and subversion of the Constitution through the Patriot Act after 9/11, which I submit is his Reichstag fire. Karl Rove and his minions are every bit the masters of propaganda that Joseph Goebbels was. They literally took lessons from Goebbels and Goring about how to create such brilliant propaganda that unreality can become reality and reality can be subverted to fantasy, political subterfuge right before your eyes. So there's just an endless broken record that is leading up to the present era, that the Bush family has had a single goal for 100 years, which is to become the most powerful family on the planet and to rule the world. And they are on the verge of doing that under George W. Bush. It's critical that every citizen of this country rise up and do something, because the day of reckoning is at hand, and these people are Nazis. They are practicing Nazi philosophy. They are mimicking Nazi tactics, and time is running out.
And now it's being reported that the architect of the Bush administration's policies, Karl Rove, is the grandson of Karl Rover, a Gauleiter or governor over an entire state in Nazi Germany. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Bob Woodward, reporting on a Bush rally, said that Karl Rove likened the meeting to a Nazi rally. Now the Bush-Rove-Schwarzenegger nexus is promoting worldwide war in the name of America's safety to stop the threat of terrorism. The same secret society that funded and supported Adolf Hitler is now supporting a move towards world government, and Karl Rove is out there on point pushing Arnold Schwarzenegger for president.
Today. We don't know what to make of the fact that he seemed to be somewhat part of the winner's circle, do we? We don't know why he was so much in evidence today.
Well, he's the Republican governor of the most populous state in the Union, who is very supportive. He's an old friend of 41's.
The San Francisco Chronicle reported the decision to have Arnold run was made by Rove at the Bohemian Grove. You've got to hand it to the political wizards. Tens of thousands of Republicans at the RNC praising and chanting for a man who's for open borders and rabidly against the Second Amendment, but they've been told to worship him, so they are. This isn't the first time we've been fooled by foreign usurpers. There was another interesting meeting in Madison Square Garden back in February of 1939 by the Bund, or the American Nazi Party. At the very same venue where Bush and Schwarzenegger gave their speeches in 2004, the American Nazi Party promoted the vision of Adolf Hitler. In fact, the Nazi Party in America was very, very popular. The people hadn't yet seen the danger, because while the American people slept, Nazi agents like Prescott Bush were working overtime for the Reich. And Arnold's father, Gustav Schwarzenegger, was busy too, volunteering for the Nazi Party in Austria when it was illegal and becoming an SS officer. And Karl Rove, reportedly his grandfather again, was a Gauleiter or a governor over an entire German state.
Mr. Fritz Kuhn. You all have heard of me through the Jewish-controlled press as a creature with horns, a cloven hoof, and a long tail. If you ask what we are actively fighting for under our charter, I will here repeat the declaration I made public some time ago. First, a social, just, white Gentile who rules the United States. Second,
all the American Nazis talked about was how much they loved America, how pro-USA they were. And a lot of the public bought it. And the fathers and grandfathers of the men who run our country today were in full support of the Bund. It's now the 21st century, and things have gotten a lot slicker. The question is, will the public buy it?
California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Thank you.
Did I wake up in the middle of a Twilight Zone or Outer Limits episode? The American people cheering and chanting the name of someone whose homeland is Austria and who openly talks about being a dictator all the time?
Thank you very much. Thank you. What a greeting.
Arnold wants to be our leader, our Fuhrer. And as American citizens, we have a right to expose him. And that's what we're about to do. From CBS's 60 Minutes to NBC's Meet the Press, Arnold has been all over the airwaves, pushing for amending the Constitution so he can run for president. High-level members of his gubernatorial campaign have now started a national movement to repeal Article 2, Clause 5 of the U.S. Constitution that blocks foreign-born from the presidency. In November of 2004, former President George Herbert Walker Bush gave Schwarzenegger the George Bush Award at his presidential library in College Station, Texas. And he told the crowd, "Don't bet against Arnold Schwarzenegger. There's a good chance he's going to end up being our president." Arnold Schwarzenegger positioned himself into the Kennedy family by marrying Maria Shriver. And now she's out shilling for him, but saying, "It's for other foreigners, not for my husband. Change it for everybody. It's fair. Just trust me." For well over a year, every day they're in the newspapers or on television, pushing to change the Constitution. And now Schwarzenegger, in an authorized biography, has told the Kennedy biographer that yes, there is a secret plan to put him into the White House. And the powerful head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Orrin Hatch, has introduced what is called the Arnold Bill. There are 3 other pieces of legislation introduced by other congressmen like Dana Rohrabacher in the House. They just continue pushing and pushing and pushing, despite the fact that in major polls, 80+% of Americans are against changing the Constitution for Schwarzenegger. But we've got to take the threat seriously, because after a year of propaganda, the numbers have dropped to 65% being against it. And then you have to ask yourself, what will those numbers be in 4 years? The elite love Arnold Schwarzenegger because he has an international appeal, and they've been very carefully grooming him for his role as American president inside the New World Order. That's why we've launched Americans Against Arnold and the website arnoldexposed.com in a desperate attempt to stop this foreign usurper.
Efforts by supporters of California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger to change the United States Constitution are not sitting well with the Texas radio host. Alex Jones claims he raised $5,000 in just 2 hours to combat the campaign for a constitutional amendment to make non-native citizens eligible to serve as president. Jones says he will run TV ads in Austin, Texas and Sacramento, California, opposing the amendment drive.
Now let's look at the men who hold the strings connected to the marionette. Here are two different San Francisco Chronicle articles revealing that it was Karl Rove at Bohemian Grove that set the strategy for Arnold's successful gubernatorial win. An article in the Scotsman newspaper in September of 2002 openly showed Arnold Schwarzenegger with Warren Buffett and Lord Rothschild and said they were there meeting at the Rothschild Castle to discuss business strategies. In the article, they talked about how he was lining up his run for U.S. president a year before he ran for governor. In the middle of the Enron-engineered California energy crisis, Arnold met secretly with Michael Milken, the junk bond dealer, and Kenneth Lay at a Beverly Hills hotel. The federal government has now released documents from the event, and guess what they were doing at the meeting? Discussing how to cover up Enron's culpability. Arnold ran for governor promising that he wouldn't take special interest money. Guess what? He's broken all previous records for taking corporate money. Like other famous Austrians we can think of, Arnold is obsessed with being king of the world. He's told friends, family, newspapers, magazines, over and over again that he wants to be ruler of the world, that he dreams of being a dictator, that he wants to be worshipped at a Nuremberg-style rally like Hitler. Rolling Stone reported on it in the 70s. The London Guardian and CNN in 2003 both reported how he told friends and family of a recurring dream where he walks the earth as our ruler, and of a 50-year plan he had as a young man to become world ruler. In 1990, he told U.S. News and World Report, "My relationship to power and authority is that I'm all for it. People need somebody to watch over them. 95% of the people in the world need to be told what to do and how to behave." Following in the footsteps of dictators before him, Arnold loves to be seen with giant images of himself behind him. The cult of personality concept in politicians is totally alien to America's history, but it's second nature to people like Kim Jong-il, dictator of North Korea, and ousted dictator Saddam Hussein of Iraq. It was pioneered by Alexander the Great and used to great effect by the Roman emperors. Hitler and Stalin just loved it because it made the people feel insignificant. In the dystopic novel 1984, huge portraits of Big Brother stare down on the slaves. But after all, Arnold's just going with the times. Now across the United States, we've seen these giant billboards with George Bush's picture on it, paid for by his supporters, that say, "George Bush, our leader." President Bush has done something that no American president has ever done. He likes to prance around in military uniforms, reminding us of where his power comes from. We should all be concerned that our president is dressing like Saddam Hussein, Fidel Castro, Mao Zedong, and Adolf Hitler. And Bush loves to be seen in uniform with lots of troops behind him. But so does Arnold. Here is Schwarzenegger giving the fascist salute in one of his bodybuilding poses. A trick the pro-Schwarzenegger press likes to play on the people is to focus on his father and then go, well, he can't help it if his father was an SS officer. What they don't like to focus in on is Nazi war criminal Kurt Waldheim, who was Secretary General of the United Nations. At his wedding to Maria Shriver in 1986, in front of a massive press in attendance, he said the following: "My friends don't want me to mention Kurt's name because of all the recent Nazi stuff and the UN controversy, but I love him, and Maria does too, and so thank you, Kurt." Here's a photo of Arnold Schwarzenegger with Kurt Waldheim in Austria in 1999. Kurt Waldheim was an elite Nazi as well, an officer in the SS. He hunted down American soldiers in Serbia and killed them. An article in '92 in Spy magazine reported on how Arnold liked to give away recordings of Adolf Hitler to friends in California. It also reported on how he loved to give the Sieg Heil salute. Former Mr. Universe Rick Wayne went public and talked about how Arnold loved to call black people the N-word and said they couldn't run or do anything, and how he went on to say that blacks were basically worthless to society. A second champion black bodybuilder, Robbie Robinson, went public. And in his testimony, he talked about a public event in front of thousands of people where Arnold in 1978 began screaming, "Down with the N-words, down with the blacks, subhuman, you people can't run the country." It goes on and on, but the mainstream media ignores it. Arnold's barbaric treatment of women is legendary, and he's publicly apologized for it. The reason this is so important is it shows a total lack of control. He's a wild man. More important is his love of domination. He loves to degrade underlings. Arnold has never challenged a 2001 Premier magazine article where he reportedly makes unattractive members on set get on their knees and call themselves ugly dogs. He reportedly revels in humiliating people until they cry. Not only is he a man after the elite's own heart, loving to dehumanize, he's totally compromised. If we know about all of these skeletons, imagine how many are still in the closet. In a sit-down interview Arnold gave We magazine, he talked about drug use and sex orgies. The elite just loves that, total control over their puppet. Then there's all the publicly available gay porn. That's right, in gay porno mags, Arnold's done some spreads. But on top of it, there's the private collections of people like Robert Mapplethorpe, who was a pioneer in hardcore homosexual pornography. One of the biggest problems in Arnold's portfolio of horrors is his admitted use of anabolic steroids. Anabolic steroids, especially heavy use, can permanently change one's psychological makeup. He's also been a poster child for steroid use that has been a ravage on the youth of America. But being a bad role model is nothing compared to the psychological effects that include mania, roid rage, extreme aggression, delusions of grandeur. This is what testosterone and its derivatives cause. It's in the medical handbooks. So let's look at this again. An individual who says he wants to be a dictator, who reportedly hands out recordings of Adolf Hitler's speeches, who openly promotes admitted Nazis like Kurt Waldheim after they're exposed as Nazis and doesn't apologize about it, now wants to be our president. And he's taken a drug that can permanently alter the chemistry of the brain, making you domineering and aggressive and delusional. We're talking about Arnold Alois Schwarzenegger being positioned to be president of the United States, in control of all of our military forces. Think about this compromised individual. In control of our B-2 bombers, our nuclear submarines, our nuclear missiles, our Air Force, our Army, our Navy, everything. You put that together with the police in black uniforms, the ski mask, the Patriot Act. It's a nightmare. And we have the very same elite that tried to bring Hitler to power now pushing Schwarzenegger. It's up to you, America. You better research these facts for yourself and take action to defend our republic from enemies foreign and domestic. In the battle for our liberties and freedoms and our children's future, it's going to be reality, not illusion, that's going to save this country. If we believe the propaganda and the slick packaging, we are going to go into the Fourth Reich of the New World Order. Schwarzenegger and his controllers are counting on you to not take action, to not inform yourself and others, to not stand up against this insane action that they're taking against us, trying to put some foreigner from Austria who says he wants to be a dictator and in control of this country.
And in spite of the attack on our homeland, on our homeland, on our homeland, on our homeland.
Schwarzenegger has the nerve to call America his homeland. By definition, your homeland is the country where you were born. And that country for you, Arnold, is Austria, of the Black Eagle and Lederhosen, where your father was an SS officer, where your mother, when he died, married another top SS officer. That's your homeland. Your homeland is the birthplace of Adolf Hitler, and America will never be your homeland. Your claim of America as your homeland is as false as everything else you do. Then Arnold went into a very revealing diatribe where he talked about the police state in Austria, a police state his father helped set up. The problem is America's turning into that very police state. It's a mirror image.
When I was a boy, the Soviets occupied part of Austria. I saw their tanks in the streets. I saw communism with my own eyes. I remember the fear we had when we had to cross into the Soviet sector. Growing up, we were told, don't look the soldiers in the eye, just look straight ahead. It was common belief that the Soviet soldiers could take a man out of his own car and ship him back to the Soviet Union as slave labor. Now, my family didn't have a car, but one day we were in my uncle's car. It was near dark as we came to the Soviet checkpoint. I was a little boy. I was not an action hero back then. But I remember how scared I was that the soldiers would pull my father or my uncle out of the car and I would never see them again. My family and so many others lived in fear of the Soviet boot.
Well, Arnold, now America imprisons more people than any other country on the face of the earth. And American children grow up in the high-tech police state that your masters have built. After winning the rigged election against his cousin John Kerry, Bush said that he had political capital. He went on to explain that that meant he could do whatever he wanted to.
Look at the number of uniformed personnel, all of them armed. It's estimated there are 60,000 armed and uniformed members of law enforcement here. Roughly one police officer or soldier tasked to this duty per every 4 or 5 spectators, the highest ratio in history.
You've driven around this city, Chris, the last couple of days. Brian and I were talking about it. It was close to an armed camp.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, George W. Bush, and First Lady Laura Bush. Wave to them. Let them know that you love America.
Administer the presidential oath of office. Justice Rehnquist.
Lord Bush went on to give an oath that he would protect and defend the Constitution, when all he's been doing is trying to dismantle it. His new Attorney General, Alberto Gonzales, has said publicly that President Bush is above the law, above the Constitution, a dictator.
Will you raise your right hand, Mr. President, and repeat after me? I, George Walker Bush.
I, George Walker Bush.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
And will to the best of my ability.
And will to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
So let's look at what Bush has actually done to the Constitution and Bill of Rights since getting into office. He passed Patriot Act 1 that dismantles at least 7 of the first 10 amendments. And under Section 802, all Americans are defined as terrorists. Under Section 802, the new definition of terrorism is redefined as acts that are dangerous to human life that violate any federal or state law. And when Bush talks about reauthorizing the Patriot Act, that's code for passing Patriot Act 2. Under the Patriot Act, Homeland Security has visited toy stores over possible trademark infringement. An Army doctor who complained too much was arrested by Homeland Security. Topless bars, zoning disputes, pot dealers. It's all under the Patriot Act. And starting in 2005, all new passports are digitally tracked by an RFID chip. It's easy to get in, but hard to get out. And before he left office, Homeland Security Chief Tom Ridge called for a world ID card. In late 2004, Bush successfully got the Congress to pass a national ID card, craftily hidden in state driver's license under federal standardization. Bush told conservatives that it would stop illegal immigration. There's nothing in the bill concerning immigration other than the fact that it actually orders the states to accept consular matriculas issued by foreign nations, so it actually makes it easier to get into the country. The bill even talks about it being used as an internal passport at checkpoints. Bush also successfully rammed through the Orwellian-named New Freedom Initiative. This forces every child in America from age 5 to 18 to be psychologically tested twice a year, whether you're homeschooled, private schooled, or public schooled, The guidelines for mental illness were written by a consortium of drug companies, and in their own internal documents, they bragged that they'll go from 15% of American children on psychotropic drugs and Ritalin to over 50%. The law states that without parental consent, while your child is at school, they will be forcibly tested. And Illinois is already jumping ahead. They're saying they're going to start forcibly testing all pregnant women. This is the type of nightmare that only Joseph Stalin could dream of. But our government is making it a reality. But if you look at foster children in America, over 2/3 of them are on psychotropic drugs. That's what happens when the state has control. 2/3 on drugs. Well, I guess that's the new freedom. The federal government has spent billions and billions of dollars putting up cameras across the nation, except for our borders. I have seen over 50 mainstream reports where video cameras are put in school bathrooms and showers. And when the schools get caught doing it, they say it's for your safety. And now the establishment just throws it in our face. Prepare to be scanned. We track you with your cell phones. We're putting cameras up on the street corners that read all your license plates and track everywhere you go. And we're going to tax you with these new cameras. We're going to put satellite tracker boxes in all your cars and transponders. We're going to tax you by the mile. This is just the way it is, so get used to it. Oh, and 8 years ago, we started putting black boxes in all the new cars that track everything you do as well. And now industry and the federal government are just calmly saying that soon all new cars will have a camera in them that scan your face as you drive and instantly report back to the police department if you're driving while you're tired or if you're arguing with your wife. Under a new sales tax system being prepared that will be implemented through the national ID card, you'll have to thumb scan when you buy and sell. And the face scanning cameras we mentioned will keep track of you not just in your car, but as you walk down the street. Almost every federal, state, and local road in the country will be satellite and transponder tracked. We already mentioned that earlier. And when Californians heard about Governor Schwarzenegger's program, they got very upset, and over 90% of them were against it in polls. The governor just said, "I don't care what you want, we're going to do this." It's going to take the average tax by the mile from 25 cents at the state level to over $3. Read it for yourself. It's the official news reports. Similar plans are being pushed by the feds in all 50 states. But that's just the financial hardship. There'll no longer be any open road. Everything you do will be tracked, chronicled, and traced. Whether it's a large highway or a rural road, everywhere you go will be chronicled. And in middle schools across the country, students are having to wear RFID tags around their necks, tracking and training them how to be good little prisoners. And now hospitals are openly discussing making their patients take implantable microchips. Bars in the United States and Europe make their patrons take chips before they can enter the VIP sections. And now the Mexican Attorney General has forced over 160 of his deputies to take implantable microchips if they want to work in his office.
I, Richard Cheney, do solemnly swear.
I, Richard Cheney, do solemnly swear.
That I will defend and support the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
It's no wonder that Speaker of the House Dennis Hastert stumbled over the oath as he read it. He's not stupid. He knows that a textbook dictatorship is being set up in America, complete with shadow government that can take control of Congress. Oh yes, now Congress has given its authority up to an unbridled executive branch. There have been other cryptic statements. The outgoing head of CENTCOM, General Tommy Franks, told Cigar Aficionado that if America is attacked by terrorists again, we'll have to suspend the Constitution in favor of a military form of government, or martial law. It's abhorrent to American values to have the military involved in any way in civilian life, especially in law enforcement. It's been a staple of Communist China and Nazi Germany, Soviet Russia, and Cuba today, but not America. Why are we following every telltale sign of a police state? We're dealing with a group of predators, an elite that sees us as cattle, as their slaves. They want to train us to be predators like they are, to join them in their quest for world empire. to be their cannon fodder. Just look at the torture they've been promoting on television and in movies, and then we watch as it manifests itself in the real world, in Iraq and Guantanamo Bay. What we're witnessing is the construction of a worldwide dictatorship. But to get it done, they have to be able to manipulate us into going along with it. They're confident that you won't wake up till it's too late. The good news is people are waking up in record numbers. The question is, now that you know the secret, now that you understand the inner workings of the New World Order, will you take action to wake others up and stand up against this Fourth Reich of the elite? The globalists have America and Europe in their grasp today, but tomorrow they want the world.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th. Malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty. Conspiracy theories, conspiracy theories, conspiracy theories. The hijackers were instruments of evil who died in vain. Behind them is a cult of evil which seeks to harm the innocent and thrives on human suffering.
To purchase additional copies of this film, or to see dozens of other films and important books, be sure and visit Infowars.com or PrisonPlanet.com. Or to order, simply call toll-free 1-888-253-3139. The globalists have been systematically engaging in a massive brainwashing campaign, telling the public that torture is a good idea. And now we've seen the aftermath of torture. The Joseph Mengele-style abuses include killing detainees and harvesting their organs. But they don't just torture people to death. They do things so horrible we can't even mention them here. And there's no mystery when it comes to finding out who ordered all of this ultra-brutal torture at Camp X-Ray at Guantanamo Bay and Gitmo and 32 other camps in Iraq. Alberto Gonzales and Chertoff and the rest of Bush's crew openly wrote memos detailing how torturing people unto death is an okay thing to do. It's part of the public record. The White House and Pentagon ordered the torture, but when they got caught, they just burned a few of their underlings. The Pentagon's own reports admit that 90% of those that were picked up at checkpoints in Iraq were totally innocent, but that didn't stop them from being tortured. In fact, the Army's own report admits that military dogs were used to bite and frighten detainees, that women were brutally raped, that detainees were beaten to death and sodomized with large objects dripping with battery acid. People's children were also raped in front of them to attain answers. This is the same type of mentality we see from serial killers, and it's riddled with all sorts of perverted sexual abuse. Is this what the land of the free and the home of the brave has become? After 13 years of sanctions, over 1.5 million Iraqis died, 700,000 of them children. And now thousands of private contractors have taken over the torture where the Pentagon left off, following in the footsteps of other famous control freak serial killers and torturers. The only reason the elite is selling us on torture is because they want to condition us to where we will accept its use against us. And it's been going on for decades in America, in the prisons, and against pro-life demonstrators, environmental activists, and anyone else that doesn't totally submit to their tyranny. The footage you're seeing is from the late 1980s and early 1990s, where the police openly pulled out nunchucks, started wrapping it around the arms of peaceful pro-life demonstrators and brutally breaking them. simply because they refused to get off the side of the sidewalk. The police thought it was their right to break people's arms because they didn't follow their orders.
They used nunchucks on the rescuers. This is an illegal martial arts weapon, and merely possessing one in California is a felony. To be attacked with one is assault with a deadly weapon. Never before in the history of America have nunchucks been used on non-violent protesters. This is the gruesome sight of what happened. The police, in unprovoked cruelty, wrapped the nunchucks around Michael Hausman's arm and broke it. When lawyers went to federal Judge Tashima to request he order the police to cease using them, he denied the request, saying in so many words that pro-lifers could not prove they were in any danger.
I can't tell you what it's like to be lying on the ground with police officers on a top of you, using all sorts of torture holes to make you walk. You can't walk even if you wanted to walk. And their sole intent is to torture you. And then listening to the screams of the people.
When you bring out riot sticks, it's usually because you expect to see some serious opposition, so you put on helmets and you put on face masks and you carry shields. These policemen were bareheaded.
But here it was calculated torture, and the policemen were enjoying the pain. They laughed at the people screaming, and all of us screaming, all grown men, mature men. You couldn't help but scream. What happened was when the two nightsticks squeezed on the wrists, they cut off the nerve ends and the flow of blood, and your hands swelled up to almost twice the size, and they turned black.
It didn't matter whether you were a woman, a man, an old person. It didn't matter what your age, sex, or anything, that they were just there. They were going to brutalize everybody. And I think probably to the women more particularly, that they were very angry that they couldn't get a young woman like myself to walk. And I could tell that it was a pride issue.
This is an important illustration because it shows us how long this tyranny has been going on in this country. And if they can get away with it with one group, they can get away with it against everybody. The fact of the matter is, the establishment and its enforcers have been setting the precedent for a long time to torture women in plain view of the public, to use illegal nunchucks and break people's arms. And now in Iraq, they have these big live TV shows with all the people confessing after they've been openly tortured. And in 2005, people they take into hospitals who refuse drug tests are restrained and then tasered repeatedly until they go ahead and urinate in a cup. And there are hundreds and hundreds of examples we don't even have time to cover here. The point is, this is all macabre and terrifying, and the New World Order is conditioning us to accept it. We must resist it.
The United Nations was founded right here in the United States in 1945 at the end of World War II. It was set up at the Presidio in San Francisco by our military-industrial complex. The Rockefellers put up the money to build Rockefeller Center and to also give them the land for the United Nations. So this whole area is New World Order funded and controlled. And basically, it's a debating club to make the third world think that they have authority and to think that they're part of the power process. But really, the G8 or the G8 nations control the United Nations through the Security Council. We hear the reports all the time. They're in the news where some UN bureaucrat runs over somebody when they're drunk driving in New York or Washington, D.C., and nothing can happen to them. But it gets a lot worse than that. The United Nations has been caught hundreds of times running giant sex rings with kidnapped women and children out of Europe, Asia, Africa, the Middle East. It's a huge business. And right here in New York, they routinely catch these UN officials and even low-level bureaucrats with their own house slaves. Many times it'll be some UN delegate from Asia, and he's got some kidnapped little girl from Russia. So these are the people in here telling you that world government's good and that they need to run your life. And you look at the UN's Charter and Declaration of Human Rights, it says you don't have any rights. It says the UN is the absolute arbiter and authority. And now we see our own government adopting the UN model of governance. The United Nations believes that private property should be in their hands, controlled by them. And when it comes to self-defense, back in 2000 at a UN meeting held here, their organization UNIDIR called for all civilian firearms to be confiscated. In fact, they stated that civilian ownership of firearms threatens the legitimate power monopoly of the state. Now, what's a power monopoly of the state? That's a dictatorship or martial law. And they strive to have governments have the monopoly of power over the people. Remember who was for gun control? Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Fidel Castro. In every case, if a government tries to disarm you, it's tyrannical. Black Americans couldn't own a gun. Native Americans had their firearms confiscated. Roman slaves 2,000 years ago couldn't own a sword or even a knife. Being disarmed is one of the key hallmarks of a society that's enslaved to its government. Sorry. A pile of fake signs meant to look like they were individually made. Getting slick here. Republicans do that too. See, this is a UN operation. This is a UN operation, so look how it's all meant to look like it's individuals. Imagine what would happen if these tens of thousands of people were truly informed about the nature of the geopolitical system. Imagine if they saw the big picture and understood that the UN is controlled by the same people that run George W. Bush. But they're all here beneath the United Nations, calling for it to be the global authority, and that somehow all of the ills in our government are caused by national sovereignty. When that's not the case, my friends. The people destroying America are the very people that created the United Nations. It is nothing more than a rubber stamp, a front group of the military-industrial complex of the New World Order. Year after year, the peace activists come out in an ineffective move criticizing Republicans, but it's impossible for them to ever criticize Democrats, who are, as the cliche goes, two sides of the same coin. Democrats and liberals, progressives, socialists, communists, whatever you want to call them, can see the corruption of the Republican Party, which is there for anybody to see. It's horrible. But they can't see the corruption of the United Nations that had thousands and thousands of Indians murdered in Burma just a few years ago to make room for United Nations UNESCO land sanctuary. These guys can see the corruption of the big oil companies, but they don't want to see the document showing that the big oil companies put up the money to found the United Nations so they could control this growing world government body way back in the mid-1940s. You know, we've got the documents where Dr. Henry Kissinger back in 1973 told the most populated 5 third world nations that they had to sterilize forcibly half their women or they wouldn't get IMF and World Bank funding. And the United Nations certified that plan with the IMF and World Bank and helped carry that out. The UN's been caught being involved in sterilization programs in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa. And in the last 6 years, 2 separate cases in Asia and Africa, the UN has been caught in massive vaccine programs, tainting them with a very expensive synthetic hormone. They bind it to the tetanus pathogen, give it to women. It's a program only for women because it wouldn't hurt men, and it then permanently sterilizes the women. Now, how is that loving and good? Well, you see, the United Nations thinks that population control is a good thing, both physically with the police state, but also stopping people's reproductive rights, sterilizing them. The UN has put out dozens of public documents where they're calling for an 80% world population reduction. In fact, at the Beijing Women's Conference, the World Conference, back in 1997, the head of the UN Food Program said, "We will use food as a weapon against the people, and we do not apologize about it." And they also gave China awards for their horribly vicious one-child policy. And now you've got 35 million more men in China than you have women. It's causing a societal breakdown. Even the communist Chinese are backing off that policy, and the UN has been urging them not to. Most of these people here are well-meaning, good folks, just like most of the idiots at the Republican National Convention are. They can't see evil. They can't name evil. They can't face up to what it is. The facts are a bunch of Malthusian, social Darwinist, same people that funded the Nazis, set up the UN to con good liberal-minded people into being part of this system. That's all this is something to co-opt the population and to enslave the population and to misdirect people into thinking that they have a real escape from the fascism of the Republican Party and other right-wing command and control dictatorships around the planet. Well, President George W. Bush has won the election, and the elites got their man back in place. President Bush, of course, has been great for the elite because he's neutralized so many millions of conservatives who believe that he actually follows conservative policies, whereas in truth he's for open borders, gun control, signing on to UNESCO and the United Nations, the growth in government in his first term, double the growth rate under Bill Clinton. But because he is a supposed conservative, he is a key Trojan horse for the elite to actually bring down our national sovereignty and set up a domestic police state unit, just like we saw in Nazi Germany or communist Russia. And make no mistake, that's exactly what Homeland Security and the new domestic CIA director are doing, is turning America into a martial law nightmare. Bush all along has been a polarizing figure, keeping people in the left or the right paradigm. So is Kerry. He's been very polarizing. That's how the elite wants you. Divide and conquer. Balkanization. That's what it's all about. So now they've put their Trojan horse, their fake conservative, their neocon, back in office under very questionable circumstances. But either way, they always control the outcome of the election because both the candidates are from the same social clique, the same organizations, and they're related.
It was the same clique, the Kerry and the Bush. Okay, what is the option? The people, what do they have to choose?
The presidential elections have turned into diversions. The real power is at the county, city, and state level. And that's where we can all, as little people, have an effect and get involved and really change policies. So that's where I suggest people get involved. You know, I authored a resolution over 2 years ago to repeal the Patriot Act, and thousands of other people picked up on it, and my personal resolution has been passed in dozens and dozens and dozens of cities. Parts of my resolution were incorporated into other resolutions and have been passed in over 400 cities and 4 states. That's just so far. I'm sure you've heard about the movement to repeal the Patriot Act at a city and county level.
Yes, I did.
Well, I just came up with the idea for that over 2 years ago, put it out on my website, Infowars.com. The people like you took action where the power is really at, and we effected change in a mighty way. Instead of being diverted by this smoke and mirrors theater, that's all this is theater with the Bush-Kerry ticket.
Okay, the question is how you can act the small people because they believe one way or another way.
We're trying to break that paradigm, that false left-right paradigm. During the protest, we met some great New Yorkers who invited us out for a tour of the city by water in their speedboat. So to add some balance, I thought I'd end the film on a happier note.
Ground zero, directly ahead of us, folks. Right there. 150-yard quarantine. We cannot get within 150 yards.
The hollowed out copper shell. Tear down the Statue of Liberty and send it back.
Documented.
Something's still beautiful about it, but
no, it's beautiful.
There's some interesting theories about what its real meaning actually is.
Oh, it's a woman in drag. It's Illuminati. It's a man in drag.
Illuminati, right?
It's a man in drag.
Freemasons built
Illuminati.
I love those shoes.
Her boobs are all worshiping.
It's a man. Every woman's are.
Oh, they are. No, it's a perspective. It's the angle you're looking at.
Why is it Illuminati symbol? What gives it away?
Well, apparently, well, no. I mean, admittedly, the French architect was an Illuminati guy. And
an accident. Well, I have a couple books on it, and
Sure.
I
would take it off now. The cop's coming over to us now. Check us out.
Well, number one, it's male and female. It's androgynous. It's like in Mel Gibson's The Passion, the devil's male and female. So it's androgynous.
Yeah, here comes the cops. Keep it rolling.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to come over to us. What, pansexual? He's got a 50 cal on the front, 60 cal on the back.
Let me get this.
But it may be
He's gonna park between us and the statue.
And they also showed you like the different. They had different ideas before they came up with the process, and I forget exactly why they decided upon this.
You know, Alex, you're right. I never thought about that. Look at her arm. That looks like a man's arm.
No, it is. It's
The
admitted.
hand is huge. Is that an Adam's apple? A man hand.
What's their name? The one with the long legs and the long blonde hair. They all say.
I'll handle it. I told you. Did I call it, guys? How's it going, guys? Hey, how you doing? Good evening, sir. Just checking out the beautiful sights tonight. Like every night, yeah. How's it going, man? I'm sorry? Newport Yacht Club. Yep. We got enough preservers for everyone here, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I got 10 in storage up in the front. I got 12 up there. Yeah, we're here. We're pretty much here every night. Yes. How's it going, guys? Right. Pretty quiet out here, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
Not a lot of action on this. Yeah.
That's.
Well, if we see anything, we'll give you a holler. Don't you recognize us by now? No.
Stop it, Buchanan.
Oh yes, you can. Come on. We're in the boat.
She's a beauty. You guys got the life hanging out next to the statue. Come on.
That's not too bad.
What's better than that, man?
You guys have a good night.
Take care.
Thank you too, man.
You, man. Thanks a lot. Good night. Safe. No, that's their line.
It's all of our line.
I see. I don't believe this.
Later. She's been inside. Old beds.
My impulses were over there talking.
Downstairs?
That's my dialogue.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. You can't, but they were cool, actually. Yeah.
Well, they're nice guys.
They were nice. But at least we know if there was going to be an Al-Qaeda attack on the statue would be saved. Most likely. These guys? It doesn't.
I know.
50 mils out.
Oh,
okay. See, now that's the reaction. They're guarding the statue tonight.
Is that the Watchtower Track Society?
Yes, it is, yeah. They like to buy buildings next to bridges.
There's the Watchtower.
They feel that buying bridges,
That's the Jehovah's Witnesses.
They feel that buying real estate next to large public works like bridges and stuff gives them energy. It's true.
Really?
That's what they think, yeah. That's why they own the real estate next to the Brooklyn and the Manhattan Bridge. They love buying real estate next to bridges. Don't ask me why. And it's all printing presses. You got to see what's going on in there. That is a factory of printing right there. This is a Brooklyn Bridge here. I don't think you heard. Are you live? 1886 this one finished. Washington, British amassed at Staten Island, 2006. Washington boogied right there. He came up through Brooklyn Heights and he had to make a quick boogie out. Because they would have killed him. Here then? No.
God, look at the purple on the water.
There would have been nothing.
Absolutely gorgeous.
How deep is this? Harry, how deep is this?
We're at 40, we're 51 feet. Actually, the last guy I saw get killed, he was on this pier, and what happened was the cops went up to get him, and what I saw with my own eyes was the cop lunged to grab the guy, and he went backwards. It was reported as a suicide. And when he fell, he hit the high tension wire.
Oh my God!
You see is a human going down. nice time. How are you doing tonight?
How you doing? What are you doing?
We're traveling around having a fun time, enjoying the convention. How are you guys doing?
Okay, good.
Yep.
You guys drinking?
Beautiful. Sorry?
Yeah, lights.
Okay. Yeah, we were just sitting out here.
All right, try to put it off, please. Where are you headed now?
We're going to go back to Newport Yacht Club. That's where I'm stationed.
Okay, you gonna go back there now?
Probably about 15 minutes.
Okay, just leave your lights on, all right?
Thank you, sir.
Okay, good night.
Have a good night. Good night to be out, isn't it? Calm. It's calm.
Nice.
God bless America.
See you later.
Again, I'm going to crack you. I didn't even think about this. God bless America. These guys don't like it.
All in all, we had a great time in New York, despite the police state.